My parents disowned me and cut me out of their will because I'm not their biological child, but inheriting from a distant relative changed everything. Let us start from the beginning. My life changed dramatically when I was 14. Around this time, my mother decided to relax again, this time with a man whose previous marriage had produced a son. Jake, already 3 years older than me, was 17. Let's also admit that we didn't get along right away. The ink on their marriage certificate had hardly dried when the tension began to rise. At first, it was the tiny issues that arise when strangers are notified that they are suddenly family and brought together. Jake would leave dirty dishes in the sink, assuming they would clean themselves. Of course, I was the one who got a lecture from my mother or new stepfather about the kitchen mess. Alternatively, I would see my shampoo disappearing faster than usual, only to discover Jake with perfectly maintained hair that appeared to have resulted from using my favorite product. It was strange, but I felt upset by more than just Jake's antics. Tom, my stepfather, handled things in the same manner. I seemed to be the problem whenever things went wrong. He'd think I was responsible without even asking. Then there was my mom. She was too focused on making this new family dynamic work to see what was happening. She'd brush it off, cover for Jake, and pretend everything was fine. I could immediately detect the difference in expectations. Mom and Tom announced they were expecting a kid around a year into our difficult living situation. At that time, everything changed. Suddenly, everything revolved around the newborn. The house required renovations, and guess which room was chosen for the nursery? Exactly, mine. I was shoved into a cramped, claustrophobic guest room with barely enough room for my possessions. It felt like a demotion, a clear sign of my role in this new family structure. A few months later, Nathan, my new half-brother, was born and quickly became the center of attention. Jake felt the same shift and grew even more entitled. He dropped out of college and moved back home, bringing with him a whirlwind of late-night parties and questionable pals who came and went at all hours. Tom dismissed my protests about the noise and trash, while my mother simply looked sorrowful, as if to say, "What can we do?" It was infuriating. I started spending more time at friends' places, anywhere I could find routine. My escape ended up being school. I stayed as long as I could, joining every organization and taking extra classes. It was more than just adolescent defiance. It was about survival. Home became a place where I always felt as if I was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion. It was suffocating. One evening stands vividly in my mind. I got home later than usual to find the house utterly still. A note on the refrigerator indicated that they had gone out to dinner, without me. I hadn't even been invited to this family supper. That note struck harder than I expected. I felt invisible, as if I did not truly belong. And it stung. Not shortly after my 18th birthday, everything almost broke. I felt Tom disliked me having any excuse to leave the house, despite the fact that I worked part-time. He repeatedly told me that it would jeopardize my academic progress. Then one evening, I returned home to discover my room utterly trashed. Jake hosted a party while my mom and Tom were gone, and my room suffered as a result. A broken lamp, alcohol stains on my project documentation. It was an outright breach of my privacy. I challenged them at breakfast the next morning. Tom responded coldly and contemptuously, "You should have been more responsible with your belongings." My mother simply sighed and whispered something about families coming together and letting go. I had finished letting things pass. Everything I did during those years seemed to be scrutinized, but not in a way that suggested concern for my well-being. Rather, it appeared like they were waiting for me to make a mistake so they could blame me. Jake, who had turned into a professional couch potato, appeared to get away with it all. Although Nathan, my tiny half-brother, was still a child, the amount of coddling he received revealed who the favorite was. I remember one time when I was working on a large science project that I found really interesting. Even at home, working on it was nearly impossible. I desired silence, so I set up a workstation in the corner of the living room. It felt like I was trying to build something delicate in the heart of Times Square. I eventually had enough. Jake would play loud music, Nathan would run about shouting, and Tom would complain about how my project was taking up too much space or making a mess. After packing, I went to see a buddy, whose parents allowed me to work in their tranquil dining room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was able to concentrate. That was when I realized how odd my home life had become. My friend said, "You're always welcome here." The invitation was easy, yet it meant everything to me. For me, home was just a place I couldn't wait to leave. Home is supposed to be a secure refuge, yet every hour away from it helped me breathe a little easier. I started working extra shifts at my job. Of course, Tom didn't like it. He frequently mentioned my job as a distraction from school, but I knew why he disliked it. I wasn't around as much for him to critique. As I accumulated more money, the thought of moving out began to form in my head, but I realized it would not be easy. My mother and Tom were unable of dealing with the situation. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the only option to regain control of my life. I was a ball of worry the day I decided to inform them I was leaving. I discovered a basic yet fairly priced apartment near my campus. From my part-time employment, I had saved enough to cover the first 3 months' rent. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. The prospect of having my own life and space kept me focused. One evening, after dinner, I seated Tom and Mom at the kitchen table. With my heart pumping, I attempted to keep my voice calm. I looked them in the eyes and said, "I'm moving out." The room became silent, and I could feel the tension mounting. You could have heard a pin drop. Tom was the first to reply. He smiled, shook his head and said, as if I had told him the most stupid thing imaginable, "You think you're ready to live on your own, just because of your age?" His voice was filled with amazement and a trace of mockery. At first, my mother said nothing. She simply sat there, staring down at the table, her expression unreadable. "I am ready," I said, attempting to sound more confident than I felt. The disagreement began when I stated that I needed my own room and had enough savings to cover it. Tom went on a rampage, accusing me. I was selfish, unappreciative, and tried to avoid my responsibilities at home. "He looks up to you, you know?" he continued, attempting to guilt me into leaving Nathan behind. As if that were enough to keep me in a hazardous atmosphere. My mother's response was calmer, but no less devastating. She did not dispute with me, like Tom did, nor did she attempt to stop me. She only continued to complain, saying things like, "Families stick together, and you'll regret it if you leave." But I knew better. This was not about family. It was about control. I stayed put not because I just desired my own space, but because I needed it for my emotional and psychological well-being. I felt like an outsider in my supposed home. I was tired of being held accountable for things beyond my control and of attempting to fit into a family that had made it apparent that I was not actually a member of it. I spent the following few days preparing. Every item I packed into a box felt like a step closer to independence, even though it wasn't easy. My mother entered my room on the morning I was supposed to leave. I readied myself for another battle, but it never happened. Instead, she helped me pack discreetly. Our conversation was brief. She asked whether I needed extra boxes or offered to donate old utensils. We both appeared to be avoiding the actual concerns, making light talk to avoid admitting that this was the end of something. Later that day, when I locked the door to my new flat, I experienced an uncommon range of feelings, including relief, grief, excitement, and worry. I was now living completely on my own. It felt simultaneously liberated and terrible. The first few nights were the most challenging. The flat seemed overwhelmingly empty and quiet. I found myself longing even the disagreeable sounds of home, like Jake's loud music, Nathan running around, and Tom's incessant nagging. However, as the days passed into weeks, I grew to cherish the silence. For the first time in years, I could actually breathe. I no longer had to tiptoe around the house, worrying about Tom's mood swings or whether Jake had hosted another party. I could come and go as I liked, eat when I wanted and sleep uninterrupted. It seemed like I was finally discovering who I was beyond the insanity of my family. A new type of freedom. Life rapidly found its groove. I balanced work, education, and maintaining my modest apartment. It was not flashy, but it was mine. My connection with my mother and Tom improved slightly after I moved out of their house. I kept my distance but saw them sometimes, which made things easier. Then, unexpectedly, I received a call from my mother. Her speech was muted and more light than normal. "Tom's been thinking about his will," she added, simply as if discussing the weather. "He wants to make sure everything is in order." I reacted hesitantly, not sure where this was going. After a pause, she said, "He has decided to include Jake and Nathan but not you. Because they are his biological children, he believes it is more rational." There it was. It stings. Although I hadn't expected much from Tom, seeing it stated so bluntly hurt me harder than I anticipated. It wasn't about the money, but about the message. The reminder that, despite all these years, I was still not regarded as a member of the family. I forced myself to answer neutrally. "I understand." Mom, maybe sensing the hurt, hastily attempted to ease the impact. "You understand, this is just legal things. It doesn't impact our feelings for you, right?" Even if I didn't believe her, I allowed the conversation to divert to other issues. But the harm was already done. That night I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, with that familiar sense of not belonging gnawing at me. Part of me wanted to confront Tom, demand an explanation, or simply tell him how deeply it hurt. However, another part of me questioned the point. For years, that family had not felt like a part of me, so why should it matter now? I ultimately decided to back off. I reduced my visits, stayed busy with school and work, and spent more time cultivating relationships with people who actually appreciated me. Friends, instructors, and co-workers who loved me for who I was, not for what I could contribute or because we had once shared a home. These were the individuals that mattered. The anguish from Tom's will and years of feeling like an outsider began to recede. It wasn't an overnight metamorphosis, but the hatred subsided, though it would occasionally boil up, especially at family events, when I saw Jake and Nathan relishing in the spotlight. I began to realize that some things were beyond my control. I started establishing my own family and sense of belonging. A few months later, Tom recovered from his health scare and their lives resumed to normal. Then came the actual test. I was invited to a family dinner to celebrate Tom's recovery. I went out of responsibility, rather than choice. The evening was just as awkward as I expected. Tom talked about his recuperation. Everyone gushed about Nathan's newest academic accomplishments, and Jake boasted about a new job he had suddenly landed. I sat there relatively silent, and it was painfully obvious that I was the odd one out. However, this time it stung less. I had come to terms with my status in the family. I was the outsider, yet there were individuals in my life that cared for me for myself. Not because of family obligations or shared DNA. I made an excuse about an early start and went after dinner. As I drove home, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. I'm good, I told myself. Really good. I dealt with the emotional impact, faced the truth of my situation, and emerged stronger and more confident in myself than ever before. For the first time in years, I felt peaceful. But life had another surprise in store. Just when I thought I had finally achieved some calm and routine, everything turned upside down again. One afternoon, I got a call from a lawyer I'd never heard of. His tone was courteous and professional, but his voice had an almost apologetic aspect. "Am I speaking with Jessica Evans?" he inquired. "Yes, that's me," I explained, bewildered. "I'm calling about Margaret Evans, your great-aunt's estate," he explained, his tone slow and measured. "She passed away recently and named you as the sole beneficiary." For a little period I fell silent. I couldn't recall Aunt Margaret. She was one of those distant relatives you'd hear about but never actually knew. She didn't have any children, and I faintly remembered my father mentioning her once or twice as someone who had helped raise him. I hadn't seen her in years, possibly since I was a tiny child. And now I'm being informed she's left everything to me. "I'm sorry for your loss," the lawyer said, breaking the stillness. "She was a remarkable woman." Still absorbing his remarks, I blurted out a thank you. Then, half expecting it to be something simple, perhaps an old house or a few family heirlooms, I inquired, "Exactly what did she leave behind?" "Your great-aunt was quite well off," he said. "Over the years, she made some excellent investments. The estate contains various properties, a significant stock portfolio, and a trust fund worth approximately $3 million. My heart halted for a moment. I sat there gripping my phone thinking, why me? We weren't very close. When I was younger, I paid her a few trips, but our relationship was never genuinely strong. My mind could not fully grasp it. The attorney then stated, "She left a letter for you. I will forward it together with the other documents." He noted that she went into greater detail regarding her decision. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, trying to make sense of everything. Why did Aunt Margaret chose me to inherit everything? I scarcely know her. Was this some kind of mistake? The next few days were spent meeting with the attorney, signing paperwork, and discovering exactly what I had inherited. There were houses, stocks, and personal stuff in addition to the money. Aunt Margaret's letter, however, impacted me deeply. In it, she stated that she had always appreciated my independence and saw in me a reflection of herself at my age. She described me as determined, self-sufficient, and capable of creating a life on my own, qualities she thought she lacked when she was younger. She wanted to offer me the opportunity to spend her riches for something meaningful. It was overwhelming. Here was this relative I barely knew, who saw something in me that my own family hadn't noticed. She appreciated and chose me. My initial move was to purchase a tiny home. Though it wasn't lavish, it was mine and represented a new chapter in my life. Thinking about long-term financial security, I also bought a rental property and invested the leftover monies. I spoke with a financial expert to ensure that I made sound judgments. It seemed weird. In the course of a week, my life had entirely changed. I no longer had to scrape by or wonder how I would make ends meet. For the first time, I felt truly secure and free. However, freedom brought a new set of challenges. At first, I didn't notify anyone about the bequest, even my relatives. Given our tumultuous past, I knew the news would not be well received. I owe them nothing. But secrets have a way of getting out, and mine was no exception. It began with a cousin I hadn't seen in years, who heard about the inheritance through legal means. My mother found out before I did, and the rest of the family soon followed suit. The phone calls started almost immediately. First, my mother called in an unusually cheerful and inquisitive tone. She complimented me, then casually stated how difficult things had been financially for her and Tom. I sensed where the talk was going, and sure enough, the floodgates erupted. Tom called first, then Jake, and then some distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Each intimated, in their own way, that they needed a piece of my inheritance. Times are tough, they would say. My mother even commented, "You know how bad Tom's health has been," as if this explained their newfound interest in me. They all seemed to have forgotten about me, but only as a possible ATM. I was overwhelmed with requests for money, loans and gifts. It felt like vultures were circling, waiting for their time to swoop down. I felt overwhelmed. For a brief period, I considered quitting up, questioning whether holding on to the bequest was selfish. But then I remembered all the years I'd spent feeling like an outsider in my own family, being blamed, discarded and ignored. I had worked hard to earn whatever I had before this windfall. I had gotten it through college on my own without their help, and now that I had some stability, they wanted to take it away. When I was struggling, none of them volunteered to help. When my mother eventually inquired why I hadn't told her about the bequest sooner, I found the strength to reject the guilt and manipulation. I softly but firmly explained to her that our separation was both emotional and physical. I had been kept away, ignored, and alienated for years, as if I belonged nowhere in the family. This inheritance allowed me to live on my own, without relying on anybody else. It is my life, I assured her, and I must live it in my own manner. I apologize if this offends you, but right now I need to act in my best interests. The outcome of that conversation was worse than I could have predicted. Mom accused me of being arrogant and inconsiderate. Tom interjected, chastising me about how families should treat one another. Nonetheless, I stood my ground. Over time the calls got less frequent, and the demands for money ceased when they understood I would not give in. It was challenging, but extremely necessary. I had realized a sad reality about family. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who bring you down. Knowing that I had protected myself brought me calm. Finally, I decided not to let them dictate my life. This inheritance was about taking control of my own destiny and, more importantly, gaining the ability to live my life on my own terms. My communication with them became strained, but I'd become accustomed to it. Their approval was no longer required, and I was not bound to offer them anything. I had friends, mentors, and people who actually cared about me, not because of familial obligations, but because of who I was. The big surprise came from an unexpected source. My younger half-brother, Nathan. I unexpectedly received a clumsy handwritten note from him. "I'm sorry for asking for money. I miss you," he wrote in his untidy handwriting. Though little, this step meant a lot to me. Nathan, barely 14, was reaching out in his own way. After that, we started texting. Little conversations about his school and interests, nothing too serious, but it was something. It was the start of a modest bridge between us, even though I wasn't optimistic about reconciling with the rest of the family. I was creating a life for myself, free of need on anyone else. For the first time in years I felt completely free. However, the impression of tranquility was fleeting. Just as I thought things had settled down, my mother contacted me again a few weeks after Nathan's letter. This time, she wished to talk things over. I could tell this wasn't going to be a chat about reconnecting or finding common ground, so I agreed to see her in public in the hopes of keeping things nice. We met at a nearby cafe and the vibe was unsettling from the start. She rarely inquired about my life or how I was doing. Instead, she got right into how difficult things had been financially since Tom's health crisis and how Nathan's private school fees were stacking up. I sat there, listening, feeling like an outsider in her list of troubles. It quickly became evident why she had requested to meet. She also added that they were thinking of upgrading the house and that she really needed a vacation to relieve her stress. It was clear she was not there to heal our relationship. She was there for a single reason. Finally, I could not stand it any longer. I cut through the tension, saying, "Mom, just get to the point." She looked me in the eye and said, without hesitation, "I expect you to write me a check for $1 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me?" I asked incredulously. She did not waver. "It is only fair. Technically, since it came from your father's side of the family, all of that money should have been mine. I was shocked. Her entitlement and audacity were astonishing. She sat there, casually demanding $1,000,000 as if it was her birthright. I said bluntly, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm not giving you $1,000,000. Her tone moved from entitled to plain angry, and her expression became severe. "You have always been unappreciative of everything we've done for you," she told us. Her remarks painted me as a criminal for not turning her the money she claimed she was owed. Without turning back, I paid the money and left the cafe. It still surprises me that my own mother attempted to guilt me into giving her money to which she had no right. What followed was even worse. A few days later, my mother started circulating rumors. She informed everybody who would listen that I had stolen the inheritance, saying it was rightfully hers, and accused me of hoarding it out of greed. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't heard from in years began calling, either to support her or to pressure me into sharing the money. The hypocrisy was staggering, especially given that Tom had omitted me from his own will because I wasn't family. Even Tom got involved, writing me a long guilt-ridden text about how I needed to consider the family and make more inclusive decisions. I reacted in a single sentence. "You didn't include me in your will because I'm not family, remember?" That shut him off for a while. But the drama did not end there. Things got heated when I received an official-looking letter in the mail. To my amazement, my mother was suing me. Yes, you read that correctly. She was suing me for a share of the inheritance, claiming that as my father's widow, she was entitled to a large amount of the money. I was stunned. Was my own mother dragging me to court? I could not believe it. At first I was afraid, expecting a protracted and costly court battle. I called my attorney, who laughed after reading the letter. "This is a joke," he remarked, flinging the letter away. "The will is airtight." He next investigated the so-called attorney who had sent the letter. The phone number was disconnected, and the address on the letterhead was for a decrepit building under construction. It became evident that my mother and Tom had engaged a dodgy, most certainly fraudulent lawyer in a last-ditch attempt to terrify me into paying them money. While I was happy that the lawsuit was unfounded, I was also terribly disappointed. Their willingness to go to such lengths for my inheritance was surprising. They had tried guilt-tripping and manipulating me, and now they were making direct legal threats. I was done attempting to salvage any sort of relationship with them. I understood I needed some distance. After the legal jitters passed, the emotional toll hit me hard. I was exhausted, sleep-deprived, and the constant drama was affecting my mental health. That was when I realized I needed a vacation from everything. We decided to take a road trip after talking with some of our friends. Nothing extravagant, just a trip to a couple spots we'd always wanted to go but never got around to. It was just what I needed. Time to clear my mind, escape the chaos, and, most importantly, consider what I wanted for my future. As we began the road, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a little period. A year ago, I was barely making it in a house that never felt like home. I now had financial security, my own home, and the freedom to make my own judgments without interference from others. It felt liberating, yet also bittersweet. Growing up, I looked to my mother and stepfather for guidance and encouragement. To me, family meant having someone who would always have your back, no matter what. But through it all, I learned a terrible lesson. Just because someone is family by blood does not guarantee they are there for you in the ways that matter. Throughout the trip, I reflected a lot and realized that I didn't need their money, validation, or acceptance. I had everything I needed, and the relationships I actually valued were those I had formed with people who loved me for who I was, not what I could offer them. In little ways, my friends, colleagues, and even Nathan expressed more genuine care for me than my mother or Tom ever did. Following the trip, I decided to write letters to each family member who had attempted to influence me. I did it for me and not for others. It was my way of achieving closure, expressing what I couldn't say in the heat of the moment. In those letters, I detailed how their actions had harmed me and how, despite my desire to be a member of the family, I was constantly pushed aside. I wished them well and hoped they would move on, just as I had. The only reaction I received came from Nathan. His letter was modest but sincere. "I appreciate you delivering the letter. I miss you. Let us get together sometime." It wasn't much, but it was the beginning. Nathan and I might one day develop something real, free of obligation or manipulation. As for the rest of the family, I had finally accepted that we were better off at a distance. The inheritance had served as a wake-up call. Not just a financial boon, but also a revelation about my true family. It wasn't the folks who raised me, it was those who supported me when I had nothing to offer but myself. Looking back, I don't have any regrets. I stayed firm, safeguarded my future, and found peace by letting go of the poisonous connections that had been holding me back. Life has a peculiar way of teaching us what is actually essential, and I'm glad for that, no matter how harsh the lessons were. Sitting in my own home, surrounded by people who feel more like family than my actual relatives ever did, I know I'm precisely where I should be. I discovered my wife's infidelity after my cancer diagnosis, rewrote my will for my children, and decided to hide my illness from her. On November 5th, I got the news I had been most afraid of: aggressive stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which was confirmed by every test. This will essentially be my last holiday season. I have a strange feeling of acceptance, oddly enough. My loved ones will be taken care of, and I have had a happy life. I hadn't told my wife Emily about the test since I'm a naturally private person. Until I received conclusive answers, I didn't want to worry her. I came home early so I could have the talk I needed. I didn't want to deal with this over the phone or over text message. My life changed in a lot of ways that day, as you might have expected given that I'm sharing this now. As I arrived at the driveway, I noticed that one of my business partner's gaudy, expensive vehicle was parked there, complete with his personalized license plate. This was very odd. When I used my phone to access our home security system, I discovered that it was in private mode and not recording. I made the decision to ignore it and drove away to our rural property in order to get my mind straight. Our security system is mostly for protection, and I hardly check it unless there's a specific cause. But I also find it relaxing to watch storms approach and to monitor the wildlife on the outside cams. I have a second video recorder set up for my personal amusement in order to store the material locally, which is inaccessible from my phone. I checked the second server and opened my laptop when I got to the country house to confirm what my gut was already telling me. As expected, Emily and James, my coworker, were in the living room, dancing, drinking wine, and then going upstairs to the bedroom. Since the microphone recorded their actions after they left the camera's field of view, it appears that they left the doors open. I wanted to know the truth because I only have a short time left, but I also didn't want the drama of a fight and divorce. I lost all the love and commitment I had for her that day, so feel free to call me a coward. I know it's not my fault, but I felt every feeling you could imagine. I've been a loyal, caring, and watchful wife. I'm now concentrating on who I am and what I value most. I spoke with my lawyer, and we went over my prenuptial agreement and will. After I gave him the rundown, we got to work figuring out how long and how much of this affair had been going on. We came to the disturbing conclusion that either I never really knew the woman I had been with for more than 20 years, or something had changed drastically in her. I'm not telling Emily or my kids anything right now. I have children from a prior relationship, but we never had children together. In order to give my kids and grandkids one final holiday memory with me, I'm going to put on a brave front and get through the holidays. In addition to trying to be a loving husband, I'll be the devoted father and grandfather. For those who are curious, Emily's affair partner, James, is a widower who hasn't been married again. I don't combine friendship and business, thus he is a business partner but not a personal friend. Jessica, the mother of my twins, made the decision to marry me, and at the time, I agreed that it was the appropriate one. When the children were 7 years old, Jessica, the mother of my children, wed a lovely man named Michael. Michael and Jessica never had kids together. I've been actively involved with the kids ever since I got my act together when they were 3 years old. At that point, I began to develop into the father I had always desired. Michael, Jessica, and I are all in our late 50s. James is in his early 50s, while Emily is about 55. Both Emily and I are in our first marriage. We were married when we were in our early 30s. Update. When the twins were born, Jessica, my ex, and I were still pretty young. Even though they came as a complete surprise, we made the most of it. I'm grateful for the life I've lived and the people I've loved as I approach my last days. They cherish these final times and keep my family near. All of the grandchildren are teenagers or older, and the twins are now in their 30s. Christmas is celebrated for 10 days every year. Christmas Eve to January 2nd is when we spend time at the farm. After everyone has arrived, we all gather to cut down a tree, then we cook, decorate, play games, and celebrate as a family. Since I purchased the property, Laura and her husband John have continued this custom. I'm still determined to keep my diagnosis a secret until after the year ends. Laura wouldn't be able to hide it if I told her, and I don't want to put John in a situation where he has to tell his wife a lie. I want the week to be enjoyable for the children and grandchildren. In a few weeks, we'll have plenty of time to prepare and grieve. In the long run, Emily's attendance this week will only be a small detail. To be honest, I don't give a damn about her nearly as much as I do about the other members of the family. It's an unusual financial scenario. After we were both financially and professionally established, Emily and I met and were married. She had 2 inheritances in a trust, a solid pension, and a good job. At her urging, we decided early on not to tell each other our full net worth. Additionally, at her request, we have a prenuptial agreement that states that any assets or trusts that existed before to the marriage, as well as any income derived from them, are not regarded as marital property. In addition to covering travel, food and petrol, I also supplied both properties, housing, and utilities. She basically had my full backing, and she spent all of her money and resources on herself. She purchased cosmetic surgery, clothing, a car, and personal trips. She has proven to be pretty disagreeable on the inside, despite her stunning exterior. I announced my retirement from the organization where I worked a few days after receiving my diagnosis. Now that I knew, I saw that Emily was a little uneasy. Since I'd be around more frequently, I can guess why. My last day of work is tomorrow, after which I'll be concentrating on spending time with my family. I don't know if Emily and James have had any more activities, but I suppose they have since I provided my lawyer access to the camera server information and allowed him to use it from his office. I don't give a damn now. James is a huge letdown, and I'm aware of my identity and value. I am not as ostentatious as James. In the winter, I prefer wearing jeans, t-shirts, and coveralls, and I drive a 12-year-old pickup truck. I am positive that James is not quite as wealthy as Emily believes him to be. How can I tell? I receive quarterly financial reports because the trust has invested in his company. My accountants and I are the only ones who know how much I have. However, let's assume that over the past 28 years, the trust has been increasing. I lead a simple life and my great-great-grandchildren have enough money to enjoy the farm and receive an education. Emily's reckoning will come when she recognizes what she's lost. I simply won't live to witness it. December was a very busy month. These past 2 weekends, we went on our customary social rounds. James attended one of the gatherings. It was difficult not to watch him and Emily. They probably didn't notice. I found it easier to maintain my composure because I'm so busy finishing things at work. Emily hasn't said anything that would make me think she's aware that I'm aware. I still share a bed with her, something I'm not proud of. Recently, I've been self-centered with her. She seems to have been using me for the majority of this year, yet I still feel like I'm taking advantage of her. Many of you have portrayed myself as honorable, but I'm not. I detest this little bit of dishonesty. Emily won't get everything, so don't stress about it. The trust is well cared for. Thanks to your feedback, I've taken precautions in case I pass away suddenly or if my health deteriorates sooner than predicted. When necessary, I have also arranged for in-home care. I will not be cared for by Emily. The lawyer will let Laura, John, and the children know if I become incompetent, and Emily will not be allowed to see me. Important papers, jewelry, and other necessities have all been relocated to a safe place. I've finally started writing letters to Emily and every member of the family. These have proven more difficult than I thought. Update: the mission has been completed. I've made it to 2024 and we had a fantastic holiday week free of trouble. I apologize in advance, but I find that laughing about my illness helps me deal with it. Recently, I've seen that I'm acting a little selfishly. I just have a few updates because everyone left yesterday afternoon. My week with my family is something I should treasure, therefore I won't discuss it. This week's observations regarding Emily. I genuinely believe that this is the first time she has betrayed me. She looked to suffer from spending the entire week with all of us. It's funny how someone's behavior makes more sense when you know something about them. The fact that she kept her phone a secret and frequently left our family get-togethers to get some air. The nicest part was when one of the grandchildren requested to accompany mom when she had to run into town. She performed nearly ridiculous mental acrobatics to resist taking the grandchild. I must admit that I asked, why not? In order to play along. Thus the affair is still going on. Now that I'm retired, she has been inquiring about my daily or weekly plans. After telling her, I inquire about her plans. To tease her, I'll propose that we have lunch later this week because I'll be in the same vicinity. A cheater's worst adversary is uncertainty. I had a meeting with my lawyer this morning. I requested him to draft documents after making some decisions. I signed a new permanent will in place of my temporary one, so it shouldn't need to be changed again. I had him draft divorce paperwork in anticipation of it all blowing out. She only receives 15% of our joint assets, such as furniture and housewares, according to the prenuptial agreement and the evidence of the affair. I maintain whatever I bought with my own money, including my retirement accounts and liquid assets. She must pay alimony if I insist on it. I have a folder including all of our evidence of the affair, which I have signed and am keeping in case I need it. By selling my debt to the trust, I gave the trustees permission to exchange it for stock in James's business. In relation to the trust, I have made a decision on its management. I'm going to drop one trustee. The 4 grandchildren will make up the remaining trusteeship, with the twins receiving the majority. John and Laura will serve as stand-ins for the grandchildren. The trusteeship will pass from Laura and John to each grandchild when they become 21. Laura receives the additional portion if any is left over. Next week, Laura, John, and the children will meet with me. I'll tell them everything I know. They will want to know why I'm doing this and will need to sign documents. My liquid assets, personal property, and the funds from James's loan will make up my personal value after this is over. In the worst situation, Emily's share of the trust's assets and worth will be minimal. I'll distribute the few personal belongings I wish to give to the children and grandchildren over the course of the upcoming weeks. My lawyer already has access to those in a secure area. A few of you made remarks on my health. I'm not resisting this, to be clear. I'm not experiencing any negative side effects from any treatments because I'm letting nature take its course. The family also observed that I was getting weary more readily. I dismissed it as simply growing older. The cough that started it all is still with me. My lung tumors were the cause of the diagnosis. I dismissed it as a persistent cough from a previous illness. When other problems start to surface, I anticipate things going south rather quickly, but by then, everyone will be aware. I want to be with the family as much as I can. With all of their various responsibilities, a big vacation would be difficult, which is why I found this week to be so crucial. It was the final time I could spend a lot of time with them all. We'll see, but I'm considering taking a quick trip for myself. I want to spend a day with every child and grandchild individually. That is my next objective. Update: the twins, Laura, John, my lawyer, and a notary came to my farm today. I've finished the things I needed to, and this process has gone about as smoothly as it could have. The family is understandably upset. The tension in the room was evident when everyone came and saw my lawyer and the notary. I requested that they simply sit and listen to me, and then sign the documents once I was done. I would respond to all of their inquiries after signing the paperwork. Everyone is aware of the trust. I informed them that it was time for me to give them authority over the trust. I explained how crucial the trust had been to my life, why I had established it, and how we had decided to keep it apart from my marriage to Emily. Additionally, I included instructions on how I wanted the trust to be used and managed. We clarified that the twins and the grandchildren would share the trust, with Laura and John serving as stand-ins for the grandchildren until they are all 21 years old. They signed the forms and had them notarized, which demonstrated their confidence in me. Following that, copies were compiled, and I fired the notary and my attorney. I thanked them for coming out on a Sunday after seeing them out. As usual, they were both polite. They were all silent when I went back to the dining room, which was also being used as a conference room. The first person to break the hush was my daughter. It was not so much a question as a stream of thought. I began by talking about my health as soon as she paused. I described my diagnosis. I heard them planning how we were going to combat this. I stopped them right here. After outlining the likelihood and letting them know that I had already had a second opinion, I informed them of what you are all well aware. I will not be seeking treatment, I will allow nature to do its thing. We argued for the next hour or an hour and a half. Laura had to go fetch my daughter after she fled the room many times. My son John and I had a heart-to-heart while they were away. They can relate to my perspective. They understand, even if they disagree. Everyone agrees that once things settle down, Laura and my daughter will change their minds. When did I find out? That was the next question I knew was coming. I informed them. After that, there was more anguish and rage. I clarified that I was not a walking corpse and that I wanted one more holiday week. I was self-centered. After the holidays, I wanted my diagnosis to be made public. For the rest of their lives, I didn't want it to ruin their vacations. Sensing there was more, my daughter started investigating me. Until everything was out, she would not leave the room. Why in the world hadn't Emily told her, she asked. I dropped the final bombshell at that point. I explained to them what I had done in my initial post. For the first time, I could actually see my daughter's eyes blaze with rage. I then informed them that Emily is still unaware that I'm aware of it. I suppose you all prepared me effectively since I addressed the schemes and plans they had in mind, scenarios you all suggested, and I responded to the same questions. I assured them that I valued them far more than Emily in the end. I simply want to be at peace and not worry about Emily for the rest of my life. During the holiday week, I had to defend what I had done. They also pieced together her going outside to breathe and her decision to go into town without the grandchild. They were concerned that I was doing this by myself. I informed them that I have pals on social media that support me throughout my darkest moments. I still want this space for me, but I won't tell them where or how, they'll find out later. We've been discussing intermittently as a group for a few hours, and the emotions were pretty raw. However, I informed them that I had to return and discuss the trust. They are aware that the trust will be highly beneficial in preventing Emily from gaining access to my hard-earned money. She didn't attend this meeting because it protects them. Having stated that, I had to disclose the trust's finances. They all probably thought of the trust as a way to avoid paying taxes or as a way to safeguard assets in a marriage if the children are from a different woman. They weren't ready for me to give them the money. The audience became quiet as I began to review the balance sheets and assets. Then came the inevitable question. Why did you have this much after all those years of hard work? I gave them my personal financial theory, which they had heard a lot of times and had absorbed. However, I informed them that I had been living off the trust for years. I trusted them enough to send them to college. With that faith, I set aside time in my life for them. And because of that trust, I was able to work for a non-profit organization essentially for nothing. If I were to leave them and their kids with one example, it would be to utilize this trust to better the lives of others, not simply to sometimes write a check to a charity, but to work for a cause they support. By educating others and fostering relationships, I've achieved far more in my years with this nonprofit than I ever could have with a check alone. I'm not pleased that I was responsible for so many positive and negative changes in everyone's lives around that table today. Although everything didn't go as planned, it's finished. They are fully aware of it. I pleaded with them to let me deal with Emily and to keep the trust a secret. For the time being, we'll maintain the status quo, but when I recover, things will be different. They all concurred. Over the course of the following few hours, we divided into smaller groups, spoke, cried, laughed and prepared a supper. I expect the twins to return, but they all left an hour ago. I love my two in-laws very much, and I know they'll tell their spouses what's going on. That's just the way they are. I was aware that this was the last peaceful evening I would have. Even though I feel like a weight has been lifted, concern has taken its place. A brief update is provided. One of Emily's pals paid me a visit, which caught me off guard. Her name is Carol, and she is roughly Emily's age. Last week, she went out with Emily for a girls' night out. The girls actually spent the evening at Carol's place. If you have read my remarks, you are aware that Emily used a ride-sharing service and returned home pretty drunk last week. Emily and Carol have been friends for a long time, but I suppose that after more than 20 years of marriage, Emily has forgotten that I introduced them. My folks were friends with Carol's parents. I suppose Emily's instability has been exacerbated by my unpredictable behavior, and last week's girls' night was a tipping point for her. She became so drunk that she told Carol about her romance. Carol reportedly urged her to stop talking, but she persisted. She continued to provide more and more information, which infuriated Carol. Emily continued to lay forth an endless stream of details while attempting to explain her behavior in response to Carol's constant criticism. The following day, Carol contacted Emily. Emily apparently had no recollection of the previous evening. Carol summed up Emily's confession, but Emily denied having an affair outright, saying Carol was wrong and that she didn't say such things. Emily was told by Carol that she was full of lies, and she was given a week to come clean or else she would tell me directly. Carol paid me a visit over coffee since Emily said she had said nothing. Emily gave me a condensed version of her confession. I surprised Carol by informing her that I already knew, even though she anticipated me to be distraught. When Emily made this confession, I asked her if anyone else was present. The only other person in the house was Carol. If Carol had told anyone else, I inquired. She was angered by that. Before telling me, she assured me she wouldn't spread such a thing. I apologized and clarified that adding more people would make my preparations more difficult because I had my own schedule for handling Emily. Carol understood. As a favor, I begged her to keep it a secret from everyone and to give Emily the impression that she believed her. Carol felt the second section didn't feel right, but she did agree with my original request. I assured her that I would be all right and begged her to try. Carol stated I only needed to ask if I needed anything else. When Carol learns about my condition, I'll have to apologize again, but I'll take care of it another day. I will thus confront Emily tomorrow. I'm going to calmly tell her what I know about my condition and how I'm going to live the rest of my life without her on our regular date night tomorrow. I hope there won't be much drama because it's public. After dessert, I'm going to approach her. I'll tell her what I know and request that she not get in touch with my family or me. Let's see how it turns out. According to Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Yes, not all plans work out the way you had hoped, and mine is no exception. Allow me to lay out my plan for you. Emily and I usually go to the same restaurant for our weekly date night. We have a regular table because we have been visiting there for so long. It's at the back, away from the lively atmosphere beside the bar, but still open to the public. I made the decision to confront her here. After dessert, I intended to do it. I made accommodations for my lawyer and his spouse at the same time. Before we started, I paid the waiter, who has been serving us for years, for both of our meals. After I left, Carol was available to assist Emily. I intended to discuss our relationship as we finished the meal. After recording it, I intended to approach her, explain how I found out about the affair, let her know I was diagnosed, and lay out my future plan. I would write a letter to her requesting that she not come to the farm or get in touch with my family. They would witness the letter. Along with the divorce papers, I would hand her a briefcase full of supporting documentation before getting up and leaving. I thought she would keep quiet to preserve her social standing. Yes, I did videotape the exchange. She raved about our excellent teamwork and the wonderful relationship we had developed over the years. I questioned her about my treatment of her, whether I had ever mistreated her, etc. Certainly not, she said. I then questioned her about her infidelity. She claimed that although she was unaware of what Carol had told me, Carol was mistaken. I informed her that I knew before Carol did. Emily was obviously rattled at that point, and I believe everything she had prepared to respond to this talk vanished. Her face's color also changed. What? Was the only thing she could ask. She nodded in agreement when I requested her to give me some uninterrupted time to do this. Her once self-assured and arrogant demeanor changed to one of deer in the headlights. She was just able to nod. I described how after my doctor's appointment I hurried home to have the most challenging conversation with the one person I wanted to talk to. I clarified that I saw his car when I pulled up. After that, I noticed that the cameras were in privacy mode. I made the decision to visit the farm. She nearly cut me off when I reminded her that I still had film, but I simply raised my hand to remind her to wait. I informed her of my diagnosis and my intention to not battle the illness. I became enraged when I noticed the anguish in her eyes. How could she be sad about me? But I took a step ahead. The waiter came over to fetch my lawyer after I gave her a signal. Both of them arrived at our table. I was given a briefcase and a letter-containing folder by my lawyer. I informed Emily that when I left tonight, I didn't want her to get in touch with me or my family or visit the property. I asked the server to see me signing the letter. After that, the lawyer and server observed me hand Emily the letter. Then I brushed them off. Finally, I handed Emily the briefcase. I informed her that I knew a lot more than she had anticipated. I was completely ruined. I informed her that I had already signed the divorce papers, which she could sign to begin the divorce process. I informed her that I didn't think I would make it through a contentious divorce. She can remain at the house in town as long as I'm here, but I'll be at the farm. After tonight, I won't see her again. Excuses were not what I wanted to hear. I informed her that I had phoned Carol to assist her in getting home. Emily maintained her poise in public as usual. She simply said, "But," and I informed her that I was finished and heading out. The owner apologized for not alerting him, and I went to the server and left her a nice tip. I saw Carol and my son at the door as I was leaving. Carol smiled briefly as she walked past me, but her eyes were worried about Emily. I was driven to the property by his wife when my kids seized my truck. On Friday night, my son and his spouse stayed with me. At midnight, I eventually persuaded them to leave for home. I felt a lot of comfort when I went to sleep, but I also felt a fresh sense of loss. Nevertheless, I managed to complete the task at hand. On Saturday, the family stopped by the farm to check on me. It was a nice day, until Carol stopped by in the afternoon, but I felt a little pampered. She claimed that despite Emily's breakdown on Friday night, she spoke with her affair partner on Saturday. After the talk, Emily became aware that she was in a terrible position and that he was only using her. Carol made careful to let me know that although Emily didn't want her to get in touch with me, she believes that if I could have a brief conversation with her, it might give her the willpower to avoid me. Carol is skilled at phrasing her requests. I grudgingly consented to speak with Emily for 2 hours at the farm. Emily could pick someone to be there for her, and I would have someone there for me. It would be a polite discussion. I refused to be diminished, blamed, or the target of blame shifting. The meeting was intended to give her answers regarding the next steps. The waiter came over to fetch my lawyer after I gave her a signal. Both of them arrived at our table. I was given a briefcase and a letter-containing folder by my lawyer. I informed Emily that when I left tonight, I didn't want her to get in touch with me or my family or visit the property. I asked the server to see me signing the letter. After that, the lawyer and server observed me hand Emily the letter. Then I brushed them off. Finally, I handed Emily the briefcase. I informed her that I knew a lot more than she had anticipated. I was completely ruined. I informed her that I'd already signed the divorce papers, which she could sign to begin the divorce process. I informed her that I didn't think I would make it through a contentious divorce. She can remain at the house in town as long as I'm here, but I'll be at the farm. After tonight, I won't see her again. Excuses were not what I wanted to hear. I informed her that I had phoned Carol to assist her in getting home. Emily maintained her poise in public as usual. She simply said, "But," and I informed her that I was finished and heading out. The owner apologized for not alerting him, and I went to the server and left her a nice tip. I saw Carol and my son at the door as I was leaving. Carol smiled briefly as she walked past me, but her eyes were worried about Emily. I was driven to the property by his wife when my kid seized my truck. On Friday night, my son and his spouse stayed with me. At midnight, I eventually persuaded them to leave for home. I felt a lot of comfort when I went to sleep, but I also felt a fresh sense of loss. Nevertheless, I managed to complete the task at hand. On Saturday, the family stopped by the farm to check on me. It was a nice day, until Carol stopped by in the afternoon, but I felt a little pampered. She claimed that despite Emily's breakdown on Friday night, she spoke with her affair partner on Saturday. After the talk, Emily became aware that she was in a terrible position and that he was only using her. Carol made careful to let me know that although Emily didn't want her to get in touch with me, she believes that if I could have a brief conversation with her, it might give her the willpower to avoid me. Carol is skilled at phrasing her requests. I grudgingly consented to speak with Emily for 2 hours at the farm. Emily could pick someone to be there for her, and I would have someone there for me. It would be a polite discussion. I refused to be diminished, blamed, or the target of blame shifting. The meeting was intended to give her answers regarding the next steps. The meeting took place this morning. I don't know why, perhaps to limit the harm, but Emily picked Carol, and I went with my daughter. In order to prevent this from happening again, I wanted Emily to feel as comfortable as possible. I had a clear direction and aim going into the meeting. To get rid of Emily. The conference proceeded according to plan. Emily sought to downplay the affair while crying and apologizing. I refused to put up with it. I explained that she needed to come to terms with the fact that she would have a home to reside until my death. The trustees would make the decision regarding the house after my passing. I clarified that she would not get any money from my estate or the trust, but she would be okay since she has her trust and her 6-figure pension. "Why won't you fight for me or us?" she said, and I have to vent about it. "I just don't care about you or us anymore," was my response to her, even though I nearly lost my anger. She was kind of wrecked by that. This is where I vent my rage. This is what a self-centered cheater thinks. They only consider themselves. They believe they are valuable enough in the eyes of the person they have destroyed to be worth fighting for. Although she didn't want them in retrospect, she received the answers she requested. Another meeting is not something I want. I believe that holding more meetings only serves to divert my attention from my goals. After leaving with Emily, Carol returned a few hours later. I spoke with her briefly. The trustees reportedly informed the affair partner that they would be converting the loan into shares in his business, and since the trust will own the bulk of the shares, they are requesting a thorough forensic audit. With her MBA, my daughter isn't wasting any time. I suppose Emily recognized what I had already thought when she turned to him for solace. He was exploiting her to try to get her to buy the debt from me. I suspected he was up to something because of several casual remarks in the recordings. The affair partner now knows that I sold the debt to the trust after the paperwork was filed, and since Emily is no longer in my life, he can no longer utilize her. He informed her. It seems that Emily also told Carol that she would only have her pension income going forward because her trust had run out. Compared to me, she thought living with the affair partner was more glamorous. She genuinely believes that his wealth surpasses mine. While my husband played on his farm, drove an old truck, and we traveled economy class, he travels in first class, drives lovely cars, and dines at upscale restaurants. When he declared his unwavering love and desire to marry her, she was preparing to file for divorce. I find it disgusting that she is so shallow and greedy. Although I won't be able to see it, I anticipate that my family will inform her of my value when I pass away. I'm so relieved that her actual nature has come to light so that I can deal with her and protect my family. Then Carol surprised me by doing something very different. Since I'm no longer burdened, she advised me to call her if I need company. Why would she or any woman want to spend time with me given my diagnosis? I questioned her. Nothing long-term exists. She retorted that any divorced or widowed lady would be eager to spend what time she had left with me, even if Emily was naive and unaware of what she had. She claimed that I'm a great man and that she would treasure any time spent with me. She even made a joke about how many women would be lining up to call me, so she might as well be first in line. She replied, "But most people won't know Emily and I are separated. Emily doesn't want the social groups to know, but she and Laura will make sure her tale is heard," she added. Being courteous, I promised to inform her. She kissed me on the cheek and grinned. After she departed, I gave it some thinking, but I'm fairly certain that I don't want that hassle in my life at this time. These are the highlights, although I left a lot out. It has been a roller coaster, but I'm doing fine. I just need some quiet time for a few days. My condition and the dissolution of my marriage will soon be known to the social circles. There will be a never-ending flow of well wishes for me. I didn't want to be treated differently, but I knew I couldn't put it off indefinitely. But life happens as it does. Update. To start, I'm doing fine. I'm still above ground and warmer than normal. Being on my feet every day is a blessing. I'm feeling a little uncomfortable and my coughing has gotten a little worse. I see that it's getting easier for me to wind up. But all in all, this week has been fantastic. First, let's talk about Emily. She's disappeared. Her standing in the community has quickly and severely collapsed. She was respectfully asked to step down from all of her leadership positions after it was made public. She has been severely criticized by the majority of her circle, who have even asked her directly if she pursued their husbands. She has made several attempts to contact me, but I have not answered. I urged the individual to tell her that I had stated what I needed to say and that I knew what I needed to know, even if there were a few efforts made through proxies. It doesn't really matter to me if she needs closure. Why should her self-centered need for that concern me? She understands my feelings. I even shared some of the affair's specifics with her. At least 6 months have passed since it began. They traveled together 3 times. Once as newlyweds, once as a couple commemorating their 20th wedding anniversary, and once as a couple who met on vacation and stayed at the same hotel. Role-playing must have been an element of their relationship. She used our home because she felt at ease there and because it is tucked away from the road, making it impossible for onlookers to see the automobiles in the driveway. She even purchased a second vehicle for herself and kept it in a local parking garage. In order for no one to recognize her car when she traveled to the affair partner's residence, it seems that she switched cars. Perhaps in order to avoid me catching her, she was rather worried about how people in her social circle would perceive this. The amount of work she put into the affair is evident from her acts alone. All of these endeavors help me to firmly establish my feelings and my approach to handling the affair. I don't regret anything I've done. My unpredictable nature was only partially to blame for the inebriated revelation to Carol. It seems that he began to distance himself from Emily as soon as he received the news that I was selling the affair partner's debt to the trust. She must have gotten drunk and vented to Carol because she was under pressure to avoid being caught and since her affair partner was no longer interested in her. You are aware of what follows. I think the affair partner's motivations for getting involved in the affair were very obvious. Emily is made even more pitiful by this, which in no way excuses her. The affair partner apparently needed Emily's assistance with his loan, while Emily desired a more opulent lifestyle with his wealth. It's fascinating how unattractive individuals are drawn to one another. We can find better mates if all of us nice folks just let the vile people get together. I apologize to those who strive on reconciliation out of dedication. It was not for me. My daughter's goals have angered the affair partner. In court, he seems to be attempting to stop her. More money is all he stands to lose. Rumor has it that he has attempted to gather funds from other investors in order to repay the loan, but sadly for him, word of his conduct has already begun to spread among my business associates. Do you recall that you should invest in people rather than businesses? Well, not many people are interested in investing in him. I'm not sure what my daughter has in store for his business, but she will put in a lot of effort to make sure it survives, just for the people who work there. I believe she is concerned that the partner in the affair may have something to conceal in the company's records. I hope it's something that can be fixed for the benefit of the staff. It has been wonderful spending time with family. This week, my family and I attended a high school basketball game. I organized a poker night as well, and it went really well. At the game were my son, my grandson, and a few old friends. The grandson witnessed how traditional men spent a night together, sitting around sharing stories. I'm hoping to add a couple more of these. This week, our family has eaten together 3 times. One evening, Carol did visit and bring food. I kept her at a distance as we conversed and ate. I'm still hesitant to let her in. Farm chores provide me comfort. I assist with equipment maintenance, check on the staff and animals, and occasionally drive the fences. I feel at ease knowing that this farm will remain in the family and continue to operate. I will always have a piece of myself. Many of my friends and acquaintances have paid me a visit. I believe this is what someone meant when they spoke of a living wake. I'm urging everyone to visit me outside. Even if it might be our last time together, I like spending time with these people. I was in the hospital for a few days, but I'm home now. I was taken to the emergency room after they discovered me breathing but unconscious. Despite my do not resuscitate order, I never passed away. I have always detested hospitals, and now that I have been diagnosed, I detest them much more. I don't wish to pass away there. I've spent some time at home. I'm unable to drive off the farm anymore. I'm determined to continue performing my duties and taking in the sunrise and sunset for as long as possible, even though they really don't want me to drive on the property. I also employ full-time home health aides, or babysitters as I refer to them, but I won't argue with the family about that. Basically, until I woke up in the hospital, I had no memory of anything. Carol and the majority of my family were present. By that point, I was stable, and the physicians only wanted to keep an eye on me for a day or two while, of course, doing more tests just to be sure. Carol, Laura, or my twins were with me nearly all the time. On one occasion, I woke up alone in my room with Emily by my side. She must have played the wife card on a duty nurse who was unaware that she should be denied entry. She was playing the kind and loyal wife, but I was exhausted. I have no idea why. I withdrew when I noticed she was caressing my head and holding my hand. She was wounded. She then began a new refrain in which she apologized profusely, claimed she was attempting to take advantage of him, and that she didn't mean anything she said to him. I did nothing but sit there. She was furious by this. She insisted that I speak with her. The nurse noticed her because she was just loud enough. Emily's behavior and my uneasiness were observed by the nurse. The nurse was slick. She wanted to do some checks, so she instructed Emily to wait outside. The nurse asked me whether I was all right when Emily left the room and the door was shut. I informed her that there should be notes stating Emily is not permitted because she was my ex-wife. After expressing regret, the nurse asked how she might help me feel less stressed. She should phone my emergency contacts, I asked. Carol and Laura, my daughter, entered the room after around 45 minutes. Emily had returned by that point and was still babbling, albeit quietly. Emily knew she had to go as soon as she saw them. I whispered to her to leave. She didn't deserve to cause a spectacle for any of the other patients. I told her to get over her self-centered thoughts and just go. She gave me a short peck on the forehead before leaving, which I really appreciate. For the sake of the other patient's peace, I backed down a little, but whatever. I received a lot of apology from the women in my life. Since they have their own lives, I can't really be angry with them. They all came up with a way to guarantee that I'm always accompanied. I'm never by myself in the house because they switch shifts. Carol and my daughter have been especially watchful. To keep an eye on who enters and exits the residence, they even built a security system. Even with all the craziness, I occasionally find some serenity by listening to the animals at dusk, seeing the sunset over the fields, and knowing that I've done everything I can to make things right before my time comes. I am appreciative of my family and friends' love and support. Emily's intrusion was distressing, but it strengthened my resolve to cut all ties with her. Now, I'm concentrating on the time I have left and creating memories with the people who are most important to me. To ensure that I would never be left alone again, they planned shifts. My daughter probably expressed her gratitude to the nurse for summoning them and her ire at the staff for allowing Emily to enter despite clear orders to the contrary. This incident just serves to highlight Emily's tendency to grasp at anything, much like a drowning person. She doesn't think I'm unique. She only views me as a tool to help her stay afloat. Every time I interact with Emily, I am struck by how much more sinister and evil her soul is. The partner in the affair is still just as much of a jackass as he was. In conversations with my daughter, his accounting department essentially provided her the full picture since they know where the wind is blowing. The affair partner has not engaged in any illegal activity related to his business. He was obviously abusing every benefit and legal loophole to boost his income over his base wage at the expense of the company's bottom line. He will be extremely irritated when my daughter assumes leadership because he will see a 60% decrease in the company's value to him. His flamboyant lifestyle is going to face a brick wall because I have a suspicion that she may simply terminate him and demote him to a silent minority owner position. Although he has threatened legal action, he has not yet taken any concrete steps. His reputation and credit are severely damaged, in my opinion. Carol is now a more enduring presence in my life. I must admit that I enjoy the company and friendship. Perhaps she is exhausting me. Several days a week, she has been staying over. I'm hoping to recover as quickly as possible, but I'll need to rely more on other people now that I can't drive. I have never been in this situation before. Carol has volunteered enthusiastically to help me in this area, and before you ask, no, we are only sitting next to one other. This evening, it's time to unwind and begin dinner. I want to thank everyone once more for their support. Your messages mean a lot to me, and I will make an effort to go back and reply to them all. Update. I regret to inform everyone that my father passed away last week. He asked me to give you your letter from him, among other things. You are aware that my time here is coming to an end if you are reading this letter. I made movies and wrote letters to every member of my family, as many of you suggested. That made me decide that I should write one last letter. To all of you, that letter is addressed. I want to express my gratitude to everyone for their suggestions and support. I have valued this brief period of life greatly, and my family will undoubtedly value it long after I am gone. That final Christmas week spent with my family was my last present to myself and to you. I would have had to turn to my family if I didn't have a place to vent and get support, which would have meant giving up on my objective. It may not be a present to my family now, but it will be in the future. The amount of fun I had creating those short flicks is beyond words. Thanks to all of you, my family will have another little piece of me. Without your advice and support, I never would have made any of those goofy little videos. To be honest, I never would have considered it. For all of you, I do have one request. My family will experience a range of emotions. I am aware that you all want a resolution, which is why I put my tale out there. Please refrain from making too many demands for updates and give my family time to grieve. I have requested that they provide you with this letter and, if possible, a final update on Emily. It is up to them to make that last update. Please be patient, everyone. Lastly, from the great beyond, I send you my best wishes and all the love I can provide. Keep in mind that nobody can guarantee tomorrow. Recognize the value of life and savor each moment. Treat yourself and those around you with kindness. I pray none of you have to follow in my father's footsteps, but if you do, know that I will do everything in my power to support you. Keep in mind that you are all really valuable. Nobody should ever tell you otherwise. From wherever I wind up, I'll give as many virtual hugs as I can. Thank you is all I have right now, yet it frequently feels so insufficient. I appreciate everything you've done. I hope that we will cross paths again in the hereafter, but not too soon. To be clear, I am the daughter of the individual who sent the letter in the last update, whom some of you believe to be my brother. In fact, it was me. I'm happy Dad left you all this letter so he could express his thoughts. In terms of Dad's death, he did not endure the same level of suffering as others who would have had his illness. I find solace in the fact that he passed away peacefully while he was sleeping. In keeping with his character, he had scheduled an autopsy in advance to make sure Emily couldn't use any aspect of his illness or demise to challenge his wishes. He had a knack for making plans for everything. I find comfort in the knowledge that there was some mercy at the end, even though it turns out that he died of a heart attack. He was cremated as he requested. While the remainder were scattered during the spring planting, some of his ashes were interred with a monument in an ancient farm cemetery. His desire to be a part of the land he loved so much was fulfilled. Emily wasn't there when we had the memorial on the farm. Security had been set up by the funeral home to make sure she couldn't go. For years, Dad had been trying to get us to move to the farm. When he retired, he even planned out home sites in the hopes that we would all move there. He had been made fun of, but we didn't take his suggestion seriously. In retrospect, I regret giving her such sway. My brother and his wife, along with my husband and I, will be relocating to the farm beginning this year. We have chosen a stunning location. At our insistence, Mom and Tom will move into Dad's home. We should all be closer together. It just feels right. Regarding Emily, witnessing her world fall apart has taught me what it really means to be a pariah. Her personality has entirely changed, and she appears to have aged 20 years in just a few months. She challenged the trust assignment and the will, but those issues were promptly settled, and she was unsuccessful. Although Dad had already given away the things he desired, she did receive their joint assets. The main problem was that she couldn't claim the house in town, which Dad had owned before they were married. She pleaded with us to give it to her. In one of the most fulfilling moments of my life, I promised her the house if she returned to using her maiden name as her last name. She accepted the offer even though the house is worth much less than the happiness she would get from removing her father's last name. I anticipate her selling the house and moving out. I don't really care, but I hope our partner has learned a valuable lesson in life. The company is in the process of rebuilding, and we have selected a new CEO. Carol received a single trust share. As Dad would have wished, we will look after her. Because of what she did for our dad, she has been a pillar of our family and will always be regarded as such. Our last update was in 2024. I am quite saddened by the fact that this will be the first year of my life without my father. I wanted to swing by and update everyone on the situation with my father's family. We celebrated our week-long holiday custom, which my father loved very much, as you are already aware. The week was excellent, if bittersweet. Dad was successful in uniting Carol and the rest of the family. We cherish her romantic, if you will, time spent with my father during his most trying times. He left one last gift for each of us, along with messages for the entire year. They moved us to tears and were so considerate. He gave Carol one final task, but I anticipate that there will be letters for the grandchildren at all of their significant occasions. The first occurred at a high school graduation last spring. This year, the home's construction is moving forward. I began to understand what Dad cherished about this farm, the seasons and the life cycles that exist here. I now have a better understanding of his choices from the previous year. Even while I still disagree with some things, I now have a greater understanding. Not as fervently as he did in the end, but it's just another barrier between us. I also began to observe the sunrises and sunsets at Dad's sites. Lisa has had a difficult existence. She had a stroke in the autumn. She survived since it was discovered in a timely manner. She is still undergoing rehabilitation in a care facility. Although she can now speak in a basic way, she still finds it difficult. She is still working on getting back to walking. She still has a long way to go. Her social circles have shown some sympathy for her health problems. Even the grandchildren of Mom, Tom and Dad have set aside their suffering to see her. I may never be a really philanthropic person. About the affair partner, I don't know a lot. He has vanished from my professional network. All I know is that a bankruptcy law firm did send an inquiry letter to the corporation. We haven't yet seen any formal filings. In terms of the business, it is profitable even without his financial support and direction. Every employee received a handsome bonus, and we controlled the debt. We are now closer because of Dad's last presence and his kind writings. By continuing to live on the farm and treasure the memories Dad left us, we continue to uphold his legacy. Every sunrise and sunset we witness from his favorite locations reflects his influence. In the place he cherished, his soul endures. I appreciate everyone's help along the way. I worked 12 years for the family business, but my dad gave it to my sister and her fiancé, then begged for help when they abandoned him. I, 36F, was fired from the firm that my father had started only 8 months before. For background, I've been with the family firm for nearly 12 years. My grandfather on my father's side created a jewelry business that we own. It was passed down to my father, and I assumed it would come to me next. After all, I am the older sister, and I have been interested in business since I was a teenager. My father always told me that he expected me to someday take over the firm. My sister, 33F, never appeared interested in a profession. She only wanted to marry and start a kid. So if Dad was going to have an heir to the company, it was supposed to be me. This has always been taken for granted. There was no formal documentation of it, but I suppose I should have planned for anything similar. I had been my father's personal assistant for 12 years. I even abandoned my first job after only 2 years because I wanted to obtain real-world experience before joining my father. I did not want to come across as entitled. However, I left my job once my father requested me to start working for him. Despite everything I had done, I was kicked out of the firm in favor of my sister and her tremendously wealthy fiancé. My sister hadn't even been a member of the family for the previous 15 years. She made a few terrible actions, and my parents cut her off shortly after she turned 18. She had announced that she would not be attending college and instead wanted to explore and discover herself. That did not set well with my parents. They offered her an ultimatum. Either attend college or leave. Being the type of person she is, she opted to leave and live with her partner at the moment. They ended their romance after only 6 months together. Then she showed up at our door, pleading to be allowed back into the family. Before she went, she told my parents a lot of terrible things, such as how she no longer needed them and how she would be better off without a family like ours. She also said that we were not good enough for her because her boyfriend's family had a much better financial situation than us. She had insulted and humiliated us before going away. When she returned, my father informed her that the terms he had imposed previously remained in effect. If she wanted to return, she would have to go to college and earn a degree, regardless of what she selected. Otherwise, she may stay outside. My sister attempted to argue and fight her way back into the family. But my father was resolute. She chose to depart again, vowing never to return. For the next 15 years, we only saw her at family gatherings and never communicated with her otherwise. We discovered information about her life updates from other relatives because she refused to speak with us directly. My mother and I attempted to contact her several times, but because we were on good terms with my father, she refused to speak with us. To her credit, she kept her word and never returned until my father chose to make touch with her again. During that period, she sorted out her life, but not in the way we expected. She never attended college since she wasn't interested. Instead, she lived with a friend for a period, acquired a job, and began working to support the life she desired. I believe that event helped her mature significantly. She changed jobs frequently, but for the past few years, she had worked at an advertising agency. Our family maintained track of her life through other relatives. She knew about us as well, thanks to the same family. My father became very ill about a year ago, and we were on the verge of losing him due to heart failure. The cardiologist informed us that his condition was serious and that he needed to make significant lifestyle adjustments. During this health scare, my father decided it was time to contact my sister and reconcile their relationship. By this point, my sister had matured significantly over the previous 15 years, and she finally accepted to rejoin the family. She came to see us alone, and we didn't chat much about her life because we were too occupied reminiscing about the past. She didn't want to make it all about herself, so she didn't reveal anything about what she'd been up to. The information we didn't obtain from her came from our relatives. We knew how she was doing professionally but not much about her personal life. Anyway, she seemed pleased to be back, and we were all focused on the reconciliation of father and daughter. It was a really emotional reunion, and I was delighted at the time, not knowing what would happen next. When she returned to see us for the second time, she brought her fiancé, which surprised everyone. She informed us they'd been dating for 3 years and were only recently engaged. None of us in the family knew about it, so we didn't find out through our regular channels. They'd kept it under wraps. The flow of information was not one-sided. Thanks to our relatives, she knew our father had some health issues, but she had no idea how serious they were. That is why she had not visited us sooner, and she felt it was inappropriate to announce her engagement at the time. Now that everything had cooled down, she decided it was time to introduce him to the family, so she invited him along. He appeared like a pleasant guy, and I could tell he was wealthy. His clothes, watch, and shoes were all costly. I felt glad for my sister because it appeared that she had finally found someone who fit her expectations. He was financially secure, had a clear vision for his life, and had his future planned out. After speaking with both of them, we discovered that her fiancé, like her first boyfriend, was the son of a wealthy man who operated a fast food franchise. Unlike her first relationship, this guy looked serious about her, and they were clearly in love. I was truly thrilled for her and complimented both of them. I never expected my father, or even my sister and her fiancé, to do what they did next. However, after only 3 weeks of knowing him, my father believed it was best if they take over the family business. He contacted me one morning and asked me to come home so we could chat about something. I was at work, running everything since my father's heart health had deteriorated, and I was essentially the boss at that point, even though he hadn't officially resigned. I knew retirement was imminent, and I was convinced that I would be the next in line to take over as CEO. But that day altered everything. Suddenly, my sister and her fiancé were in the running to take over the business I had been running for years. When I arrived at my parents' house, my sister and her fiancé were not present, but my parents were, and they looked grim. After some casual chat, my father dropped the bombshell. I initially assumed he was joking, but when I learned he was genuine, I couldn't believe it. When I inquired why he would make such a radical decision after just 3 weeks of knowing him, he said he had reasons but refused to discuss. After much fighting, Dad finally revealed that he thought my sister and her fiancé would be better at operating the firm than I was. The cherry on top was that he thought gifting them the business would be a welcome gift, to bring them back into the family, as they were about to begin a new chapter by getting married. He thought this would be their wedding gift. I attempted to persuade him that this was a terrible idea. A wedding gift doesn't have to be the size of an entire business simply because the guy appeared wealthy. In addition, my father had always told me that when he retired, I would inherit the firm. I had formed my entire life around that expectation, and now he was taking it away from me to give to individuals who had been out of our lives for 15 years. I tried to tell him that maybe he could make us business partners and bargained and negotiated with him because we were talking about my future. But my father was adamant that it would be better if they took over. He contended that because my sister's fiancé's father had previously established a successful business, they would be able to grow our jewelry business twice as quickly as I could. I begged him for just one opportunity, but he wouldn't listen. I was heartbroken. Not just because I was losing something so important, but also because I had dedicated 12 years of my life to the business only to wind up with nothing. Worse, I still hadn't won my father's respect. If he had truly recognized the time and effort I had put into the firm, he would not have dismissed me. That was the day I resolved to cut all links with my family because I had nothing else to say to them. I had hoped my sister would fight for me, but she also let me down. She and her fiancé eagerly received the so-called wedding gift, which was effectively my life's labor. My sister knew I'd always aspired to take over the family business after my father retired. I had talked about it nonstop since I was 13. She knew exactly what she was doing when she took that gift. She was snatching my dreams and transforming them into her own. To make matters worse, she took to social media to thank our parents for the magnificent wedding gift and then used the post to announce her engagement. The most upsetting aspect of it was that no one from the family contacted me after that. When I left my father's house, it felt as if everyone had stopped caring about me. I felt used, and it appeared that the 12 years I had spent in the business had been completely wasted. Fortunately, I had enough savings to fall back on. For the following few months, I did nothing except try to put my life back together. Everything had fallen apart. That happened 8 months ago. Since then, I began therapy because I could feel myself slipping into depression and knew I wanted to treat it before it worsened. Seeing my sister's social media posts made me nauseous, so I blocked her. I also informed my relatives that I was no longer in contact with my family and did not want to hear anything about them, no matter how important the news. They followed my desires and kept everything a secret from me. As a result, I had no notion that my father's health had been slowly declining over the previous few months. My sister and her fiancé seem unconcerned about it. I only found out a week ago, when my father contacted me from the hospital. He informed me that he had suffered a cardiac arrest in the middle of the night and asked me to come see him. Because I had banned his number, he called me using someone else's phone. I felt awful for a moment, but then I remembered what he had done to me 8 months before, and the remorse subsided slightly. After that phone call, I promised to come meet him immediately. I dropped everything and headed to the hospital. When I arrived, my mother and father were present, but my sister and her fiancé were nowhere to be found. I found this perplexing because I assumed they were close, especially since they ran the family business. I couldn't help but ask my parents where my sister and her fiancé were as soon as I walked into the hospital room. With great regret, my father informed me that my sister and her fiancé had both claimed to be too busy to come. I was shocked. Running the business for 12 years taught me that it was a profitable venture that almost ran itself. Unless there was a serious catastrophe, there was no reason to be at work all the time. That's how it worked when I was in control. I couldn't say how things were going under their control, but when my father said they were too busy to see him, I inquired whether they had paid him any visits since his heart attack. He admitted they had not. He had contacted them, but they had only texted back, stating they were too busy and would come after he was discharged. These details astounded me, and I could tell my father recognized he had made a huge mistake in handing over the reins of the firm to my sister and her fiancé. He explained that one of the main reasons he called was to apologize for what he had done. He stated that he felt guilty and sorry for pushing me out of the firm despite all of my hard work and effort. Now he wants to make things right by inviting me back into the family and the business. He described how heartbroken he was when my sister and her fiancé did not arrive at the hospital. He realized that they didn't care about him in the same manner that he cared for them. He also informed me that this was not the first time they had refused to show up for him. They had become increasingly estranged in recent months. After he handed over the firm, their visits grew less frequent. They used to come every other day to check on him when his health began to deteriorate, but now they claim they are too busy with work to come by. This did not set well with him. Or me, because we both know no one is busy. It wouldn't have been difficult for them to take an hour out of their day, especially given they lived just a few blocks away from my parents' house. My father had said nothing at the moment, but they had passed a limit, and he could no longer take their contempt. He wanted to reclaim his firm and give it to the person who actually deserved it. Me. We discussed everything in the hospital room, and he formally invited me back into the firm. I was overjoyed. My father apologized for everything, and while I wasn't fully over it, I forgive him since gaining back what I had worked for meant everything to me. If forgiving my father was the price, I was willing to pay it. The difficulty now is that my father had previously discussed this with my sister. He informed her he wanted her to leave the business because he had discovered that, while he had always cared for her, she had never been there for him. He couldn't stand the disrespect any longer, so he resolved to reclaim the company and give it to the rightful owner. He told her that they'd have to look after themselves. Unsurprisingly, my sister was upset. For whatever reason, she blamed me for everything. She contacted me this morning and lashed out, accusing me of being a horrible person and said she couldn't believe I would be so rude to her. I'm not really sure why she's acting so crazily. I think there's something we don't know, but she's acting as if she's lost everything. And it's all my fault. The reality is, I believe this is her own fault. She chose not to see our father after he suffered a cardiac arrest, which is a dangerous situation. She could have taken time off work to visit him. She was the one acting selfishly, and now I'm receiving what I've always deserved. 8 months ago, she had no trouble receiving a present she knew she didn't deserve. So why should I turn my back on something I actually deserve? She was devastated, and I tried to console her, but she hung up mid-sentence. Now I'm wondering if I'm the evil guy here. I feel like I'm constantly taking the blame, and I'm fatigued. Am I a jerk for allowing my father to ask my sister and her fiancé to leave the family business so that I could retake it? Update 1. Thank you all very much for your responses. I felt I didn't deserve my sister's criticism, but hearing it from you has reassured me. If people who know nothing about our lives believe I deserve the business, I have nothing further to say in my defense. I don't think I have to either. It's been a few days since I last spoke with my sister and I haven't heard back. The good news is that she hasn't blocked me on any platform, so I suppose that's a good indication. I can't shake the notion that there's more going on than she's admitting. I find it difficult to imagine that someone with a wealthy fiancé would act in this manner simply because they lost control of our firm. I believe that not everything is as it appears with her fiancé. Some of you inquired about this in the comments section of the original piece, but I did not address it since I did not believe it was important at the time. Now, however, I assume her fiancé's family is struggling financially. According to what I've heard, his father's company has suffered considerable losses over the last year and has been unable to recover. I believe my sister and her fiancé saw our family business as an opportunity to sneak in and take over as a backup plan. I still don't understand why my sister reacted so strongly when she realized that I was being allowed to rejoin the company and she was being asked to step down. If her fiancé's family was still financially secure, she wouldn't have to be concerned. However, she was distraught. And something about the situation did not make sense. I have a hunch she will tell the truth shortly. Fortunately, my father never signed any agreements or contracts that would have legally passed the firm to my sister and her fiancé. That would have been disastrous. He remained CEO the entire time, with them reporting to him in the same position I had held. He had been educating them to take over, but it is now evident that this will not happen. I spoke with my father, who informed me that my sister is quite sad, but he cannot afford to worry about her sentiments right now. His primary objective is to transfer the business to me so that I can take control and manage everything. He's already working with a lawyer to create the required documentation, and I should be taking over very shortly. To be honest, I'm looking forward to the adjustment, and my sister's dramatic outbursts can't bring me down right now. Update 2. Hello everyone. It's been a few weeks since my last post, and I wanted to give you an update. I am now the new CEO of my father's jewelry firm. The transition is complete, and it feels fantastic to finally be in charge. There were some difficulties throughout the changeover, primarily due to my sister's intervention, but it's finally complete. My sister is not thrilled about any of this, and I can now confirm that my theory was true. She and her fiancé were attempting to establish a foothold in our family business, despite knowing that her fiancé's father's company was faltering. They saw the family firm as a safety net in case his father's company failed. Apparently, it was my sister's idea to persuade my father to reintegrate them into the family by transferring the firm to her fiancé. Unfortunately, my father fell for it. He revealed to me recently that he was not thinking clearly at the time. He was enticed by the thought that someone from a successful business family could run the company better than I could. My father first intended to keep me in my previous position, but when I stated unequivocally that I wanted to be the company's CEO or nothing, he became enraged. That's what caused the 8 months of anguish for both of us. Fortunately, my father came to his senses just in time to avoid a huge catastrophe. As it turns out, my sister's fiancé and his father's firm are in terrible difficulties, with their market credibility virtually wiped out. I'd heard reports that their business was likely to fail, but I didn't believe them. I assumed that if something significant happened, my father would contact me, and he expected me to do the same if I was aware. Unfortunately, neither of us contracted out, which was a poor decision. My sister recently revealed the truth. She contacted me soon before the move was complete, admitting that they needed work because they didn't know how long her fiancé's father could keep his firm running. She asked me for assistance. I told her I'd think about it, and I honestly don't mind hiring them. However, knowing their true goals from the outset, I can no longer trust them. That's what I'm fighting with right now. I want to help her, but how can I hire somebody I don't trust? I told her I needed time to make a decision, and she agreed to wait. Update 3. After careful consideration, I have chosen not to hire my sister and her fiancé. I know this may appear selfish to some, but I can't trust them. When my father offered them the business, they accepted without hesitation, and for 8 months, they had no sympathy or concern for anyone other than themselves. I do not want folks like that working with or around me. It was difficult, but I informed my sister that I couldn't assist her. As expected, she did not take it well. She came into my office the other day, threw a fit, and accused me of being callous and selfish. She even stated she regretted giving me the company back, which I thought odd because it was never her decision. It was my father's. Her assertion that she did me a huge favor by letting me take over the company was absurd. I might have tolerated her actions, but her statement irritated me. I informed her that she had never done me any favors, not now, nor in the past. She never cared about me, therefore she couldn't expect me to care about her right now. I calmly asked her to leave, but she refused and kept screaming at me, undermining me in my own office. At that point, I had no choice but to phone the police and have her removed. I'm too busy at work to deal with unnecessary drama. When the cops arrived, she didn't say much and eventually left. It's been a few days since the incident and I still haven't heard from her. I assume she'll leave us alone now, but even if she doesn't, I'm not worried. I'll get a restraining order if necessary. I stopped having S*X with my wife unless she was sober, and now we're stuck in a loveless, roommate-like marriage, unsure of our future. My wife, 35F, and I, 35M, have been married for 15 years and together for 20. We have 2 children, ages 12 and 14, whom we adore, and we try constantly to provide them with the greatest possible life. Things have been difficult over the last 3 years. I recognize that our children take a lot of our time and resources, with school, band, sports, and extracurricular activities. I am aware of the toll it may have on marriages. However, for the last 3 years, my wife and I have had very little closeness or intercourse. We've been attempting to work on that aspect of our relationship, but the last year has been the most difficult, by far the darkest year of our marriage. We seldom spoke and eventually became roommates, co-parenting under the same home. It was gloomy and discouraging, prompting us to consider divorce. Things became so dark that the entire home turned dismal. We sought aid through individual and couples therapy, which seemed to improve gradually. We began having in-depth conversations about what our marriage looked like and what we hoped it could be. Then things got tougher. My wife told me she was no longer in love with me, but simply saw me as a best friend and loved me in a platonic way. This absence of romantic love was one of the reasons she did not want closeness or sex. I was astonished and devastated. I grew angry and unhappy, unable to understand why the person I loved no longer wanted or desired me. Things deteriorated again, and we were back at square one. One afternoon, I had a heart-to-heart with her, asking where the source of the problem was. Her reaction was, "I don't know." She admitted to harboring animosity against me but couldn't pinpoint the source. This provided little information into how to fix things, leaving me perplexed and frustrated. We've gotten to the point where she claims she has no sex drive or desire for intimacy. She claims she only wants companionship, implying a co-parenting roommate dynamic. I asked her what I could do or what made me unappealing, and her response was invariably, "I don't know." She admits to loving me, but it isn't the same. She's felt isolated for years, and marriage seems like too much work. Her primary emphasis is on the children, and my efforts as a co-parent are important to her. I'm at a loss and simply voicing my frustration. It's difficult to accept that the person you love no longer cares about you. I feel as if I'm only here to give financially and as a parent. When she talks about companionship, it appears that she is content with having a nice father for the children and my financial assistance. She has told me that she has no interest in intimacy and does not want it right now. She stated that the only way she could have sex was if she was intoxicated, which I find abhorrent and unacceptable. I told her I wouldn't be a part of that because forcing herself into intimacy with booze or drugs is unhealthy. To my surprise, this angered her and made her more aloof. Despite this, we are both very honest and open. We have never cheated and we have full access to each other's phones, emails, and social media, but we rarely check. I inquired whether there was anyone else and she denied it, which I trust. We gently searched each other's belongings and, as predicted, found nothing untoward. We've always been forthright, even about difficult things, so I don't suspect any wrongdoing or cheating. Is it wrong for me to decline sex when she's intoxicated? I'm solid in my viewpoint since drunk or high sex does not sit well with me. I have no idea how to help our position, and I am feeling increasingly frightened and frantic. We're both fairly young, healthy and attractive. We both have stable employment and are excellent parents. I'm not sure how our lives brought us to this point. I'd appreciate some outside perspective and advice on how to handle something like this. It feels terrible to be unwanted and undesirable by my own husband. I despise it. We did some swinging in the past, which was enjoyable for a bit. We agreed to stop and have determined that it is no longer a factor. When we were swinging, our marriage appeared to be in good condition. We informed our couples therapist to ensure that we were not overlooking a potential problem. I asked my wife if our swinging experience had changed her opinion of our relationship, but she responded no. Our swinging was always done together, and it was entirely sex-based, with no emotional or polyamorous elements. I believe her because she has always been upfront and honest, even when it is uncomfortable. Swinging was her idea, not mine, and I trust her when she says it's no longer an issue. It could be something she needs to discuss further with her therapist or during our couples treatment. Update 1. The term resentment has long been a central element in therapy. It's been eating me up inside, especially since my wife keeps telling me she has no idea why she is bitter or what's bothering her emotionally. I brought this up again with our therapist, and we spoke about how we'd been together for 15 years, married since we were 14 years old. We grew up together and welcomed our first child when she was 19 and I was 20. That dramatically altered the trajectory of our life. We lived in extreme poverty and faced several difficulties, with little social life over the past decade since we were too preoccupied with raising children. Our children, now 12 and 14, took up all of our attention. The therapist asked my wife a lot of questions about her emotions, and 90% of her answers were about the kids. It felt like she was reluctant to say how bad things were at times because she may feel guilty or ashamed, as if it meant she regretted having children. I brought this up during the session, and the therapist pushed her to look at things from a more personal perspective, rather than just as a mother. This was an eye-opener. My wife stated that she was frustrated that we had lost out on so many life events. She was clear, though, that she didn't miss out on other relationships, dating or partying, but she did feel like she had lost all of her friends. This was huge, as one of the most difficult aspects of our lives has been how secluded we've grown while raising children. I reminded her of the importance of friendships and how she should prioritize herself and her social relationships. For the past 3 years, we've talked about the importance of friendships, particularly with peers who can help us negotiate life's problems or just provide us joy. My wife always avoids this, despite her desire for external stimuli. Her children have always been the reason she hasn't invested in friendships or herself. At this point in the conversation, it was evident that many of her complaints were related to the children. I inquired whether she was upset with me because I got her pregnant so young, and she responded no. She admitted that it was illogical to blame me because it takes two to tango. I saw this as progress since it provided us with something to work on. We agreed to devote more time to nurturing friendships, both jointly and individually. Toward the end of the session, we addressed next moves. It was still unknown what would happen. I was forthright in asking my wife what her plans were. I had decided before the session that if she insisted on the co-parenting roommate scenario, I would turn 180 degrees and focus on myself. She essentially repeated the same thing. She doesn't want closeness or sex with me right now, but she loves me and feels horrible about not being there for me. As I said in my initial post, I brought up the brief swinging encounter and she assured me that it was not an issue. I agree with her, it was a mechanical solution to a problem that did not exist at the time. We tried it, agreed to quit, and went on. I also mentioned additional life situations that could have produced animosity, but we didn't make much progress in determining the fundamental cause, which was frustrating. I immediately told my wife that I would not be okay with the arrangement. I informed her that I had done everything I could and that this matter no longer involved me or required any more action on my side. I was quite clear that I would not tolerate this dynamic and that I needed to be with someone who actively participated in our marriage, worked toward resolutions, and was interested in sustaining an intimate and sexual relationship. I made it plain that I was not going to be a convenience or just a roommate and co-parent. I told her that I loved her and wanted this to work, but that I would only stay committed to the marriage if she was as devoted. If she wasn't, I wouldn't continue in a relationship where my efforts weren't appreciated. I assured her that I had no plans to leave or seek a divorce, but if this dynamic persisted, divorce was unavoidable. Of course, there were tears, and the session ended on a gloomy, unhappy note. Nothing was addressed, and I left feeling discouraged, determined to begin the 180 approach as soon as possible. The 180 method necessitates maintaining distance while remaining cold and transactional, which is unpleasant, especially since this dynamic was already chilly and transactional. I started following the 180 tactics the same day, informing my wife that I would respect the roommate and co-parent dynamic without complaint, but but she should know that I wasn't happy and would never be okay with it. I also told her that if she didn't want to put in the effort, I would stop working on it. She agreed and retired to bed. I began establishing distance, focused on myself, and keeping conversations brief and transactional. When she requested for assistance with personal matters, I declined, which surprised her. She was outraged, accusing me of being juvenile, but I emphasized that she was now accountable for her own life and difficulties. We didn't talk much during the next 3 days, just when absolutely necessary. During this time, she grew visibly concerned and stressed, but I resisted my natural want to console and assist her. She cried one night, telling me she was stressed and worried about me because of my indifference. I reminded her calmly that she had chosen this dynamic, and that I too was taking care of myself. It's been difficult to be cold and distant since, as I've indicated, I adore her and want to touch and console her. However, I knew this could be manipulation on her part to keep me in the friend zone, so I remained the course. Now, a week into the 180 method, I've noticed a lot of changes on her end. I believe she is coming to realize that I am more than just a co-parent and buddy. A few days ago, I texted her a bill breakdown and a 50-50th split on our financial responsibility. She was enraged, calling it out of left field. I said that friends split everything 50-50ths, and as her friend, I expected the same. This made me realize how much I'd been taken for granted. Her pleasure and convenience had been at my expense. I pushed on, reminding her that this was the dynamic she had requested, and that it was still a good deal because she would have to fund 100% of everything if she were on her own. To summarize, while the 180 method has proven effective in many aspects, I remain concerned about the entire issue. There have been numerous eye-opening experiences, some of which have been difficult to confront. However, it has generated renewed energy and attempts on her part. She's talking to me more, and while it's difficult to say no, I hope this continues as things improve. I've also seen that she's making more time for herself outside of motherhood, which is significant given that she neglected herself for many years. I'm glad to see her become more like herself again. My goal is that as we work on ourselves, our marriage will improve. It's impossible to predict where this will go from here. We remain courteous and friendly, which is a positive indication. Boundaries are established, and expectations are extremely apparent. Whatever the conclusion, I will be satisfied with everything that has been accomplished. We will continue with couples therapy until we either reignite our marriage or divorce. A non-biased third party serves as a witness and advisor during this process. No matter what, I will always love my wife, but I will not participate in a sexless, intimacy-free marriage because we deserve more. Am I the asshole for making my son live with his mother, stepdad, and 3 step-siblings after he verbally abused my husband? This entire situation is kinda fucked and honestly I'm a bit heartbroken for my husband. Real names IDC I'm Sean 37M, my husband is Zach 36M and my son is 16 not saying his name. I divorced my ex-wife after she cheated on me for the entirety of our marriage. That was over a decade ago IDC anymore, son is mine already over and done. I met Zach when I was 28, my son was 7. Me and Zach hit it off instantly. I was finally in a place to start dating again and thankfully he was the first person I was interested in. We connected on everything me and my ex-wife did and a million more things. People say life has a plan for you and honestly I believe it. I'd go through a million more divorces and be cheated on over and over if I ended up with him every time. One of the big things was my son. Zach was hesitant at first just because of the situation but he wanted a family badly and I was excited for him to meet my son. After dating for a year I talked to my ex and told her I'm introducing our son to a guy I'm seeing, told her it's serious and I see a future with him. She was happy for me. We have a very good relationship now. Just told me to tell her when I was going to do it so she could be prepared if our son had any questions for her when he visited next. Zach and my son were best friends. Did everything together. They loved playing Minecraft together. They spent hours sitting in front of the TV. I loved watching them. I was so fucking happy the first person I found after my ex was this amazing. After about 6 months I asked Zach to move in and the rest is exactly as I've been describing. Amazing. My son started calling Zach his other dad when he was 10. Very sweet moment which makes this hurt worse. Well, last weekend my son had 3 of his friends over. They were playing video games in his room and I just left to do grocery shopping for the week, so it was just them and Zach. I don't know how this topic came up but things got very homophobic. My husband was sitting on the couch and I guess my son and his friends thought me, and he left but it was just me. My son's room is connected to the living room, so if you're sitting in the living room it's not super hard to hear what's going on in his room if he's being loud enough. 4 teenage boys playing video games. One of them said how it feels having a F slur, IDK if I can say it or not on here, as a father. My son laughed and said it was kinda shitty. They said my husband probably touched him when he was little and my son replied, he can try it now, he'll get his ass beat. So not even being a dick to Zach but now also threatening him over something we all know he would never do. They kept saying shit like, which one do you think takes it in the ass? Probably the F-slur, at least your real dad still likes women, just a bunch of hateful shit. My husband sat there listening to it all silently crying. Also Zach has spent a good 4 hours a day at the gym for the last 3 years so IDK who's getting their ass beat but it ain't him. I got home about 2 hours later to my husband sitting in his car with a bag packed waiting for me so he could leave but didn't want to leave my son alone. I asked what's going on, why are you leaving, and he told me everything. I tried to understand as best I could. I insisted he wasn't serious. He's just being a stupid kid acting tough with his friends, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Zach left and I went inside and went off on my son. His friends left and I spent a good 3 hours going back and forth with my son. At first he was very unapologetic and kind of agreed with his friends. I asked if he actually thought my husband sexually abused him when he was younger and he said no, but kids block those kinds of memories out, so really who knows. I told him to pack his shit, he's living with his mother. Info: his mom lives 3 hours away, which means new school, new friends if at all, less private space as he'd have to share a room with his stepbrother, etc. Just everything that you'd expect going from a single kid in a house to one of 4. My son instantly changed his attitude. He was crying, begging me not to send him away. He didn't mean it, he was just lying to seem cool to his friends. I asked why he doubled down when they left and he didn't have an answer. I told him to pack his shit, he's leaving in the morning. Called my ex, told her the situation and she agrees he needs something drastic. What he did wasn't okay at all. Fast forward to now and my husband is back but he cries every night. Honestly it feels like he's mourning, which I don't want, because when you mourn you don't get over someone, you get as close to indifferent as possible to keep living your life without them. I don't want that. I want my husband and my son to have that strong bond I know they have and don't want them to throw it away over this. I don't agree with what my son did, but those accusations at minimum can ruin someone's life and at most end it. I'm disgusted with my son. He calls me every day and tells me he misses me and Zach and wants to come home. I stay strong on the phone, but after I break down and my husband tries to console me. Tell me my son can come back and he will leave, but no, I'm not doing that. I just don't know what to do. I miss my son. I miss coming home and seeing them spending time together. I've thought about therapy for him but he said no. You can't force therapy on someone. They'll just sit there for an hour and piss away $400. I need advice. Relevant comments. The Book of Torment. I'd be contacting the parents of those 3 other idiots too. OOP. I told them what happened and why they came home so soon. Original plan was to spend the night over. They said they'd handle it and thanked me for informing them, but who knows if they actually did anything. Stoner Therapist 89, NTA. Therapist here, but obviously everyone is different, so take it with a grain of salt. Parenting is sometimes wildly difficult, and this is one of those times. You did exactly the right thing. There are so many lessons for your son to learn here. Just name a few. He needs to not only learn the consequences of his actions but that some things truly cannot be taken back. 2. Trying to be cool by being an asshole for absolutely no reason will not end well. It will not only alienate the people who actually care about you, but the people who get off on being unkind will eventually turn on you too. 3. Most people do not get along with their step-parents and he has been taking that for granted. Separately, if you let him back and Zach leaves, your relationship with your son will be forever altered, as well as your son's life in general. All the love Zach has for him and their connection can be repaired once he gets his head out of his ass. If Zach leaves, your son will know he ruined his father's relationship for the rest of his life. The guilt and resentment from that can cause huge problems later on in life. This can be worked on. It can be resolved. I strongly suggest making family therapy a requirement for moving back into the house with an LGBTQIA+ friendly therapist, who can get down to the root of how harmful this was and make him understand that. Individual therapy is also a great idea, but family dynamic stuff needs to take priority. Edited to correct names. Grimwall. This is great advice, but considering the man alleged he was possibly a pedophile, OP's husband clearly isn't going to risk his future on someone who is capable of being that callous. I wouldn't either. This is fixable, but it doesn't mean it will be. It's not any different if a blended family comes together, and the daughter accuses her stepdad of touching her. There was literally a post 2 months ago about this exactly. He moved out, divorced the mom, and refused to stop the divorce once she confessed her bio dad put her up to it so he could fuck with the mom. Kid thought dad would come back if it happened. Newsflash, He didn't. That said, everyone told him that his future wasn't worth risking it. Just because he didn't get a full-on accusation and a police investigation doesn't mean he should be asked to risk it. I'm saying the same here. Zach said he would move out if the son came back. I think we are likely beyond counseling, at least for a while, certainly not while he's a minor. There is hope in the future though, and this is the way. Neat Pen 6522, absolutely NTA. Your son is old enough to know what he said is wrong, and he also chose being cool to his friends over his stepdad, who has shown him nothing but love and support for more than half his life. Everything we say and do has a consequence, whether good or bad, and no one should be exempt from those consequences even when it hurts. It's the pain that teaches the lesson of how powerful our words and actions are. With that said, the consequences can be taken further to ensure that your son learns this valuable lesson. I think you and Zach need to sit down and make a list of things your son needs to accomplish this year while with his mother in order for Zach to feel comfortable with your son moving back at some point. Some examples. Volunteer in some sort of LGBT program for teens where he has to directly interact with them one-on-one. Counseling, a letter of apology to Zach and a separate one to you. A sit-down, probably over Zoom, with you guys, him, his mother, and her partner if she has one, where all his parents discuss how wrong his choice was, the real-life consequences to Zach that could have happened, how he broke trust with Zach, and so on. He needs to see all of you adults band together on this so he can get it hammered home that you are united in this. Anything Zach personally requires from your son in order to move forward. The harsh truth that things may never be the same with him and Zach ever again. His words permanently impacted that. Update. This will be long. Sorry. Not going to lie, the entire OG post was basically a disaster. I expected a few replies with only one actually being helpful, and then the post died. Didn't happen that way. So much back and forth and so much hate towards me being gay. I expected some, but holy shit. I was done with that post when someone suggested that me and my husband both abuse my son sexually just now. Disaster. I thought living in bumfuck Montana was bad with the homophobic shit I deal with. As for the update, I spent the day yesterday with my son. A lot of people accused me of not taking his claim seriously. I did. The first 30 minutes of our initial talk when this all happened was about if he actually was abused. He said no. I asked again when I got here. I made sure to let him know there is no one I'd believe over him. He won't be punished for saying the truth if he was abused for not, but I needed to know. Again, he said no, he was never touched or raped by my husband. On to the questions and his answers. Why would you say something so dangerous? My son said he was feeling rejected by my husband since as of late he hasn't been spending nearly as much time with him. Which is true. A large part of my husband's life is my son. Zach tutors him, he coaches him in his sport, basketball. He goes on morning runs with my son, he used to drive him to and from school before my son got his car. They both share a lot of interests, and as a kid/step-parent dynamic they spend a lot of time together. Towards the end of last year's summer when my son was still with his mother's, my husband talked to me. He said he wanted to start spending more time apart, but not that kind of apart. He wanted to have more of a social life. He wanted to be able to do things away from us but not like separate, if that makes sense. He realized my son would be leaving for college in 2-ish years, and my son was such a large part of his life he didn't want to become depressed after he left with nothing to do. I agreed and said it was a good idea, and he had my full support as long as he still came home every night at a reasonable time and didn't let his relationship with my son suffer or anything. As of now, yes, it is different. My son doesn't need rides to school. He doesn't need tutoring. He doesn't do basketball anymore. Their hobbies are still the same, but my husband has been spending less time at home. It's not like he's gone all hours of the day and comes back at 3 a.m., but he has a healthy social life. IDK, how to explain it? Do you realize how dangerous it is to say something like that if it isn't true? He said yes, and he didn't think anyone was listening. He was just going along with his friend's shit. That didn't make sense to me, so I asked why he stood by his statement after I sent his friends home. He said he thought he shouldn't back down from something he says. Kind of like a ride or die. IDK. I told him that's fucking stupid and never do that, especially if he regrets what he said and it wasn't true in the first place. He said he knows he realized that when it happened, but he just couldn't stop himself from keeping it up. It didn't hit him that it was serious until I told him he's going to stay with his mother. Why do you want to be friends with people that talk so much shit about your parents? He doesn't want to, but the kids bully the shit out of everyone they don't like, and he feels like he's in too deep to back out now. I do understand. I had kids in my school like that. Bully everyone. They were cool to me though until they found out I was gay, then they fucked my last few years of high school up. I told him I get it to some degree, but he doesn't have to add into what they're saying. Small chuckle and a fuck you is usually enough to get people to move on from something. I also asked about them bullying him because they kind of were. He said yeah, but they're not that bad with it. They just rip into him every so often about having gay dads, and I guess over time it made my son feel poorly towards my husband. The distance my husband was setting with my son mixed with his friends saying the shut they did just added up to that. I told him I understood. I want to make it clear, I don't support what he said. I understand the emotions behind it though. Why didn't you talk to us about how you were feeling? He said he didn't want to start anything. My husband and he are still close. He didn't know how he felt and was more confused than anything. So why say something that would cause a fight if he didn't even know if he felt that way? I also understood this. At this point I think this is just one miscommunication after another. Open dialogue would have prevented all of this from happening. There were a lot more questions, but me and my ex ended with, do you actually feel remorseful for what you said, or are you just tired of sleeping in the same room as a 7-year-old? He's actually remorseful. Told me even if he was staying there all year he would still feel terrible over what he said about Zach. Reassuring him again if anything did happen now is the time to speak and I will believe him again, he said no. He started crying saying he just missed us. Emotional moment, we hugged, told him I loved him and that would never change. Ask him to leave the room so me and his mother could talk. We decided on a month-to-month assessment to see when he would get privileges back, ending with him coming home. There were conditions to all of this like family therapy, solo therapy, cutting his friends off completely, which I would help with. He was against the solo therapy but came around. He asked if Zach was here. I said no but would ask him if he wanted to come next time, which my son smiled at. I still agree sending my son to my ex-wife's was the right move. A lot of people aggressively disagree. Which is fine. My parenting style isn't for everyone. One of you told me I should beat the kids up though, so like, do I really care if some of you disagree with how I patent IDK? Not really. Situation still sucks IDK, what to say. I miss my son. He isn't coming home right now and I wish I was leaving her house with him. As it stands right now, son is living with his mother and her family. He will get his phone and PS5 and car back at the end of the first, second and third month. In that order he will be able to move out of the room he's currently in, out into the guest house at the end of month 4. Every month after that is touch and go, and we'll discuss at the end of each month what we think son will do. Bi-weekly solo therapy, and we will all do bi-weekly family therapy. We see it as he should do solo therapy 1 week, then family therapy the next. He can come back sooner. I want him back. My husband wants him back. He's wanted him back since he left. His mother is holding strong, but she also sees he's just miserable, so I think she'll break at some point and give up the guest house early. It is what it is. At the end of the night my son asked if Zach would want to hear from him so he could apologize, and I told him yes. I've told him yes a few times now. Zach would love to hear from him. I doubt he'd have to wait longer than 1 ring before Zach picked up. My son called him as I was leaving, so I know they spoke. IDK about what though? When I got home Zach was feeling like shit and blaming himself more for all of this. I told him it's no one's fault, we just needed to talk to each other more. All in all, I think my son is remorseful and he was just feeling trapped and isolated in a shitty situation and didn't know how to get out of. I feel for him and I wish I saw what was happening sooner. Thank you all for the advice. Or most of you. Some of you were just nasty and hateful. Someone on my first post called Stoner Therapist something like that gave good fucking advice. I didn't say it on that post, but if you read this good shit, thanks for it. Next update will be when he comes home. Hopefully it will be soon. Thanks y'all. Relevant comments. Scary Cycle 1508. I think my last verdict was NTA, so I can only reiterate that I do think you did the right thing. You removed your son from a situation that wasn't just hurtful to your husband, but also to your son, because the influence from those other kids was just disgusting. Also to your husband. It's definitely not his fault. He is doing the smart thing, developing a social life for when your son is off to school. Did you talk to your son about why Zach was spending less time at home? Did he understand that it was so he wouldn't be as miserable once your son is out of the house? Avocado_Mr. 284. With what Zach did, the issue isn't that he chose to develop a social life. That's smart of him. The issue is that he pulled away from this kid he had a very close parental relationship with, and gave him no warning or explanation. That's going to make any kid insecure and unhappy. Sure, OP could have explained this to his son, but honestly, in a perfect world, since Zach and the son were so close, he would have done this himself instead of being shielded by OP, and would have known to do this. Both OP and Zach did screw up here. Not on a massive level, to be clear. Just the ordinary kind of screw up which all parents, even the excellent ones, make at some point. It just sucks that it spiraled here, But I do think the bullying and discriminatory environment at school is more to blame than this mistake. Revolutionary Cow 7961. What your kid did is horrible, not gonna sugarcoat. But what your husband did and you allowed was bound to backfire. Who the hell ever heard of pulling away from your kid because he'd be going to college in a couple of years? And your husband didn't want to feel sad because he would miss him so much when he left. For God's sake, your husband needs to grow emotionally. Way to cause your kid to have a breakdown because he suddenly feels unloved and doesn't know why. I'm sorry, what the kid said was reprehensible, but if anyone is to blame here, it's the parents for being idiots and thinking this would ease your husband's feelings of loss because the little boy is growing up. He basically abandoned the kid with no explanation and pulled away. What did you think the end result would be? Consider yourself lucky he didn't go hog wild, bad kid. I'm sorry this comes across as mean, but I just can't get over doing this to a kid. Prompt No 2857. This is one of the most extreme punishments I've ever heard for a kid's first offense. This kid was getting teased because of his parents and was never coached on what to say. And now they are punished for 4 months because a parent overheard and didn't realize the child was a victim too. OOP, I never said this was his first offense. Most recently he asked a girl out, she said no, so he and his friends egged her car. This is his first offense, as in accusing someone of assault when it wasn't true, but I feel like that's a pretty serious thing to do and not common, so IDK. I doubt he will be gone for 4 months. Prompt No 2857. He didn't accuse Zach of abuse. He was deflecting so he wouldn't be ridiculed. He was in a position he wasn't prepared for. I know you don't want your son ridiculed and teased about being gay at school because that's likely what would have happened if he took up for Zach. Now, for egging someone's car, that's a physical, not just words among friends, and deserves a harsher punishment because that's assault and vandalism. Mighty fine hotcakes. Thank you, stoner therapist from a fellow psych graduate. My comment was very blunt in saying y'all need to do the hard thing and go to therapy. Good job on being parents. It'll take time, but it will be time well invested for the well-being of your family. Stoner therapist 89, reading the feedback on my post was so interesting. Gotten everything from being called a hero to, you're the worst therapist in the world. So as I said, very interesting. My family is constantly comparing me to my successful cousin, and I've reached my breaking point. I'm a 30-year-old freelance graphic designer, and this year's Thanksgiving was a total mess. My family gets together every year and my cousin Kevin's name always comes up. The way they talk about him makes you think he walks on water. Kevin works as a corporate lawyer and is the family's golden boy. He's tall, always well-dressed, drives a fancy car, and embodies almost every success stereotype that my family holds dear. Meanwhile, I'm just the person doing the art projects. This year, it began before Kevin arrived. We were sitting at the dinner table, and my mother made the first statement as soon as the food hit the plates. She did not waste any time. Kevin really has his life together, doesn't he? She asked, staring at me as if I should nod and agree. I just kept my head down and focused on the mashed potatoes. My freelance business has been doing well lately, yet none of them cares. All they see is that I don't make 6 figures in some high-powered profession, and that's all that matters to them. The night carried on, and the subject kept returning to Kevin. My aunts and uncles would not quit talking about him. Have you heard? Kevin's firm is preparing him for partnership. Alternatively, oh, and he just returned from a Maldives trip. It's as if they are enamored with him. I've learned to keep silent over the years. There's no point in trying to steer the topic when everything points to my cousin. But this year seemed different. I'm not sure why, but something inside me couldn't take it anymore. As if on cue, Kevin made his spectacular appearance. He arrived late, of course, and the instant he went through the door, all eyes were on him. He walked in, flashing the keys to his new sports car like he was the star of a reality show. Everyone came up to greet him. I remained sitting, observing on the sidelines as they virtually fawned over him. Nobody cared to ask me about my life or my job. I'd just secured a very great freelance gig with a popular independent brand, yet it was as if I didn't exist. Then came the kicker. During supper, my mother leaned over and remarked, "Maybe if you had stuck to a more stable career, you could afford a place like Kevin's." I could feel my hands tightening into fists beneath the table. I didn't say anything, but my insides were boiling. It wasn't just one comment, it was years of hearing the same story. I understand what they think. Kevin is the success story, and I'm the guy who could have done more. But here's the thing. Kevin's life is not flawless. He's unhappy at his high-stress work, and I know he's been in more failed relationships than I can count. He's told me before about how lonely he is, but none of this matters to the family. They just see the surface and they believe he has it all. Knowing this does not assist, however. Even while I understand his hardships, I can't shake the notion that I'm constantly in his shadow. Then my uncle joined in. He leaned down half joking. You know, Kevin could probably get you a job at his company. Maybe it's time to get serious about work, right? I tried to chuckle, but inside I felt like I was going to burst. It's as if they don't see me. I've developed a successful career, yet they don't consider it true work. They simply cannot respect it. After dinner, I found myself drinking more than I normally would. Everyone moved into the living room, where the talk naturally turned back to Kevin. They discussed his recent promotion, his new automobile, and the vacation he just enjoyed. I tried to join in at one point, casually mentioning the freelancing job I'd been working on, but before I could finish, my aunt interrupted to tell me that Kevin's firm is sending him to Europe for a large case. I felt invisible. That's when the memories came pouring back. Growing up, the story was always the same. Kevin was the kid I was always compared to at school activities, family holidays, and even birthday celebrations. It was always, look at Kevin, isn't he amazing? Meanwhile, I was only there as the other cousin. I'm not sure what came over me, but I couldn't be silent any longer. When I eventually spoke up, the room became quiet. I said something like, you people know I have my own life, right? It may not be a well-paying corporate position, but it makes me happy. The room lapsed into an uneasy quiet. My mother gave me the look that suggests she's disappointed without saying anything. No one knew what to say, of course. Kevin, as the golden child, attempted to smooth things over. He smiled and complimented my creative work, but it did not feel real. It seemed patronizing. That was when I snapped. I responded, thanks, but I don't need validation from someone who doesn't even know what happiness is. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was stunned. Nobody had ever spoken to Kevin like way, especially not me. My father swiftly drew me aside, muttering that I was causing a commotion, but I didn't care anymore. I was finished pretending everything was good. Without saying anything else, I grabbed my coat and walked out. I couldn't stand being in that house anymore. I was fed up with the continual comparisons and the sense of never being good enough. As soon as I arrived home, I opened Reddit and vented. I blogged about everything. How I'd been compared to Kevin my entire life, how Thanksgiving was the final straw, and how I was tired of being treated as if I didn't exist. The post received thousands of upvotes and hundreds of comments. People from all over shared their own family comparison stories, and I felt less alone than I had in a long time. Late that night, I received a text from Kevin. I saw your post. We need to talk. My phone was constantly buzzing the morning after Thanksgiving. At first, I didn't even look into it. I knew what it was. After my Reddit article went viral, I expected some family members to see it, and they did. It was a mixed bag. Some responses were sympathetic, while others were filled with wrath. My aunt left a lengthy voicemail, unhappy that I had discussed intimate family affairs in public. Another cousin, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, sent me a message stating, I understand. I have been there. That one startled me. Then came the message I had been dreading. From my mother. Her call arrived at 10 a.m., and I could already imagine what the talk would be like. I let it ring for a while before picking up. She did not hold back. She was unhappy that I had posted our family business online, and she demanded that I apologize to Kevin for embarrassing him in front of everyone. It was all the typical stuff, like how I needed to set things right and correct what I'd done. This time, though, things were different. I refused to cave. I refused to apologize, even after years of quietly living with the repeated comparisons. I made it apparent that I was over pretending things were good. And if they couldn't accept me for who I was, I'd have to walk away. She was quiet for a time, perhaps not expecting me to stand firm like that. However, the call ended with her expressing her disappointment in me. It pained, but I understood what had to happen. Later that night, Kevin called me. I wasn't sure what to expect, perhaps another lecture, or some passive-aggressive attempt to smooth things over, but Kevin simply wanted to chat. I almost did not pick up. A part of me wanted to just ignore him, but curiosity got the best of me. I responded, and after a brief awkward chat, we decided to meet the next day at a local coffee shop. When I arrived, Kevin was already sitting at a table by the window, looking slightly less put together than normal. He wasn't dressed sharply. Just a hoodie and pants, which was unusual for him. I sat down, and after a few moments of small conversation, he got to the point. He apologized. He stated he had no idea how much the family's continual comparisons had influenced me. I nodded, but I didn't entirely believe it. I figured he must be aware on some level. He'd always been the golden child, and I assumed he appreciated it, even if he didn't acknowledge it out loud. But then he said something that took me off guard. He complained about his profession, including the hard hours, constant pressure, and the fact that his parents prioritized his career over his happiness. It was eating him up. He even admitted that he had been considering quitting for a long time but didn't know how to tell his family. He informed me that all the acclaim and attention he received didn't make him happy. In reality, it only made him feel more imprisoned. I just sat there, stunned. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. I used to believe he enjoyed the attention, but after hearing him speak, I understood he too was frustrated, just like me. We began talking more openly than ever before about how much pressure we both felt from our families. I told him how being compared to him my entire life had made me feel invisible, as if nothing I accomplished could ever measure up. Surprisingly, he said he envied me. He stated he wished he had the bravery to follow something he was passionate about, as I was with my design job, but he felt too constrained by the expectations placed on him. Then he dropped the bomb. He intended to quit his work and travel for a year to figure out what he truly wanted in life. I wasn't sure what to say. We were talking about Kevin, the guy who had everything, and now he was telling me he was about to throw it all away to go trekking or whatever. Part of me was stunned, but another part of me admired him for it. It required courage to walk away from a profession like his, especially because his entire family had been rooting for him for years. When he eventually told the family about his plan, everything went as expected. The same relatives who had been praising his praises only days before were now full of criticism. How could you throw away such a bright career? How about your future? It felt weird to watch. All of their admiration for him was disintegrating before my eyes. I couldn't help but feel satisfied. For once, Kevin wasn't being treated as if he were perfect. He was just like the rest of us. Imperfect and attempting to figure things out. As Kevin began arranging his vacation, I found myself respecting him in ways I never expected. He was taking control of his life by doing what he wanted rather than what others expected of him. And for the first time, I didn't feel as if I were living in his shadow. The family had finally stopped treating him as if he were untouchable, which seemed like a victory, not just for me, but for both of us. A few days later, my parents arranged a family meeting to discuss Kevin's choice, as well as my recent defiance. I went, but this time I wouldn't sit quietly. I told them straight up that if they didn't quit comparing me to others, I was going to cut off contact. I was not going to allow them to continue to make me feel inadequate. There was a lot of tension in the room after that, but I wasn't concerned. I had finally uttered everything I needed to say. I left the conference with a peculiar sensation of peace. I had no idea what would happen next with my family, but for the first time, it didn't matter. I was finally living life on my own terms, and it felt great. Update 2. 2 weeks had passed since the family gathering, and I hadn't spoken with my parents. Honestly, the silence seemed like an odd combination of relief and anguish. On the one hand, I was emotionally exhausted by the entire process, but on the other, I finally felt at ease knowing I had stood my ground. The last thing I told them was clear: if they didn't stop comparing me to Kevin, I was going to terminate communication. It had left them astonished. And the silence. Yeah, they were trying to find out how to reply. In the midst of all that silence, my phone rang. That was my younger sister. She typically avoided family conflict, but this time she called to express her admiration for how I handled things during the meeting. She told me she had also felt the burden of family expectations but had never been brave enough to speak up. Hearing that was surprising, yet it made sense. She's always been in the background, never making waves, so I guess I never considered that she may be feeling some of the same weight I was. Meanwhile, Kevin was already making moves. I received a message from him stating that he had sold his sports vehicle and was reducing his residence in preparation for his extensive trip plans. The guy didn't waste any time. I couldn't help but be surprised by how quickly he was going, but I had to appreciate it. He was truly taking control of his life and doing things that made him happy, which surprised me. It was bizarre to see him transition from the ideal corporate person to someone who consciously chose to walk away from it all. But the biggest surprise happened a few days later. I was sitting at home, surfing around Reddit, when my phone buzzed again. It was my father. My father isn't one for long chats or dramatic speeches, so when I saw his name come up, I didn't expect much. But when I opened the message, I was floored. It was a quick statement. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." That is it. It was a little message, but coming from him meant a lot. For as long as I could remember, my father had always been the silent sort, never displaying any emotion. So receiving this text from him felt enormous. Of course, not everyone agreed with the way things had gone. One of my aunts called and blatantly tried to guilt-trip me into apologizing to my mother. She went on about how family comes first and how upset my mother was, but this time I wasn't giving up. I stood firm, telling her that things had to change and that I would not continue to live under the same weight of expectations. I wasn't being rude, but I was direct. It felt like another tiny win to be able to set boundaries with them, even if they didn't appreciate it. I kept posting Reddit throughout everything, and the support I received from strangers was astounding. Every time I submitted an update, I received comments from folks who had been in similar situations. It felt almost like treatment. Seeing that other individuals knew what I was going through made me feel less alone. It provided me with confirmation that I hadn't had from my own family in years. Then one night during one of our catch-up talks, Kevin smacked me with something unexpected. He suggested I join him on his travels for a few months. He thought it would be a perfect opportunity for both of us to get away from the family stress and simply reset. I wasn't sure how to answer at first. The idea of taking a few months off was appealing, but I had never been the kind to take impromptu travels, especially with someone with such a tangled history. Still, it remained in the back of my mind. A few days later, my parents' silence ended. My mother called, and it was not the angry, demanding call I had anticipated. Instead, she was in tears, pleading with me to come over and talk. She didn't understand why I was furious or angry, and she pleaded with me to make things right before they grew worse. I agreed to meet with her, but this time I set the terms. I told her I'd come over, but first we'd have an honest chat about how her incessant comparisons to Kevin had affected me over the years. She pondered before agreeing. When I arrived at the residence, things were tight. My mother was defensive at first, not understanding why I was making such a big deal about things. But as I laid it all out, how the Thanksgiving dinner went, how she always bragged about Kevin's success while never acknowledging mine, it began to set in. I provided her specific examples, demonstrating how the family's fixation on Kevin had made me feel like an afterthought for years. At first, she denied it. She insisted that she simply wanted the best for me and that she never intended to hurt me. But as the talk progressed, I saw a shift in her. She began to realize how her actions, albeit well-intentioned, had caused significant damage. She apologized, and while I accepted it, I knew it would take time to heal. My father was also present, sitting calmly as he usually does. He didn't say much, but when I mentioned how suffocating their expectations had been, he nodded. That tiny act meant far more than any words could have. It was his way of saying he understood. The meeting concluded on a cautiously hopeful note. My mother stated she was willing to work on things, and my father even promised to attend one of my freelancing art shows, something he had never done before. I left feeling optimistic, but I knew it would take time for things to really change. Later that night, I found myself reflecting on Kevin's offer to go. Perhaps this was the ideal time to take a break from the family conflict and focus on myself. I'd spent years coping with their expectations, and now I had a chance to break away, at least for a short time. I've chosen to go. I texted Kevin and said I'd accompany him on the first leg of his journey. I wasn't sure what to anticipate, but I decided it was time to find out. Update 3. Departure day came quickly. Kevin and I boarded the flight to Japan, our first stop. I'd never traveled much before, so the entire event felt weird. The exhilaration came in waves, accompanied by a small amount of anxiety. There we were, two cousins who had spent most of our lives entangled in family dysfunction, set to embark on this big journey together. Before we departed, we agreed on one thing: no family conversations. This was our opportunity to leave everything behind and simply enjoy the adventure. The first several days in Japan were a jumble of unfamiliar sights, sounds, and foods. We jumped right into sightseeing, temples, busy streets, and neon-lit nights. Kevin appeared calmer than he has in a long time. He wasn't constantly checking his phone or discussing work. I began to see a different side of him, one that was unrelated to his work or his family's expectations. I wasn't sure what to make of it at first, but it was a noticeable departure from the Kevin I knew. After a long day of touring, we ended up at a quiet supper location and ate bowls of ramen. Kevin finally talked about his choice to quit his work. It wasn't just the stress, he continued. It was the knowledge that he had been living a life controlled by what others desired for him. His parents, his colleagues, and even our extended family. Everything he had done up until now had been for their approval, and he had no idea what he wanted for himself. It hit me harder than I expected, owing to the realization that we were more alike than I had previously assumed. Although our journeys had been different, we both felt shackled by expectations. His is the perfect success story, whereas mine is constantly being compared to that achievement. The more we chatted, the more the barriers between us came down. For the first time, we were having a genuine conversation, rather than the surface-level conversations we'd had at family events. Kevin said that he had always coveted my ability to pursue my passions. He told me that while I might not have the money or prestige, I did have something he lacked: passion. In exchange, I revealed that I had always felt inadequate next to him. It was a real, honest chat that brought us closer than ever before. Of course, things were not perfect. A few days later, we had our first major argument. Kevin, being Kevin, wanted to organize every element of our trip, including itineraries, backup plans, and spreadsheets of potential destinations. Meanwhile, I wanted to be more spontaneous, to go with the flow and explore without a set timetable. The conflict was inevitable. We ended up not speaking for the rest of the day because we were both too obstinate to back down. By the next morning, we were both done. We sat down to apologize. Kevin stated that his urge to control every aspect stemmed from his demanding career, where everything had to be perfect. I recognized that my dissatisfaction was not just about the vacation. It was deeper. It was about how I still felt compelled to prove something. We agreed to meet each other halfway. We eventually reached a compromise. Some days, we followed Kevin's ideas, while others, we let the day flow naturally. Once we found our groove, the trip was precisely what I needed. We trekked through the mountains, visited peaceful temples, and even made a surprise weekend vacation to the countryside. The longer we were traveling, the lighter I felt. It was like peeling away layers of anticipation with each new experience. I began to regain my joy, not just in life, but also at work. I even got out my sketchbook for the first time in months to draw scenes from the trip that had inspired me. Throughout, my phone rang with texts from home, largely from my mother. She sent updates on how things were progressing, but I kept my comments brief. I wasn't ready to go back into that environment just yet. Then one day, I received a message from my father. "Hope you're finding what you're looking for." It read brief and straightforward, but it had a lot of weight coming from him. I did not answer immediately, but the message lingered with me. As Kevin and I continued our journey, he began to worry about what he would do when it was all done. He didn't intend to return to corporate law, but he wasn't sure what the next step was. One night, I proposed that he consider consulting or teaching law part-time. For the first time, he appeared open to the notion. It was an odd shift. Kevin, who had always been certain of his path, was now exploring something quite different. But it felt like a positive change. One night, while scrolling through Reddit, I decided to share a reflection on how the trip had affected my outlook. I discussed letting go of the desire for family approval and how my relationship with Kevin had evolved from rivalry to mutual respect. It felt good to share, and the responses poured in again, full of encouragement and understanding. A few hours later, my mom texted me. She saw the post and told me she was proud of me for following my dreams. It was unexpected, but for the first time, I felt cautiously optimistic about making things right with her. By the end of the journey, I felt more in control of my life than I had in the past. I was no longer defined by familial comparisons, and for the first time, I felt completely confident in myself. Kevin and I parted ways at the airport. He was going to his next trip, while I was returning home. We both had a better knowledge of each other now, which I never imagined would happen. As I returned to my home life, I couldn't help but feel that it was the beginning of something new. My freelancing company was picking up again, and I had some huge ideas. And perhaps there was something else on the horizon, but more on that later. Update 4. Coming home from my trip with Kevin felt different in a way that I couldn't quite understand at first. Everything in my apartment looked smaller, almost as if it couldn't accommodate the new perspective I'd received throughout our travels. But rather than feeling confined or trapped, I felt more in control, as if I suddenly had room to breathe. I felt clear, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't weighed down by familial comparisons or self-doubt. I was eager to get back into life full force. When I went back, the first thing I did was catch up on my freelance job. I hadn't imagined how much going away would refuel my imagination. Within days, new ideas flowed, and I felt more motivated than I had in months. I began working with a few new clients, including a well-known company that I'd been wanting to work with for a while. After finalizing the agreement, I made an update on a freelance site regarding the expansion of my firm. The response was astounding. It wasn't just the upvotes or comments. It was the acknowledgement from individuals who understood the grind, who had watched me rage and now saw me thrive. As I returned to my normal schedule, my family began to contact me more frequently. My mother called and invited me to supper, and I noticed my father sending the occasional text asking how things were doing at work. They seemed to be trying, and while I admired their efforts, I remained vigilant. I wasn't going to let myself fall back into the toxic comparisons that had governed my life for so long. I eventually accepted my mom's dinner invitation. I was a little nervous, expecting the same old ritual of hearing about Kevin's newest achievements, but to my astonishment, everything was different. She was truly interested in my trip with Kevin, inquiring about the places we went and what the experience was like. For once, the topic wasn't about Kevin's accomplishments or how I measured up to him. It was nearly normal. During supper, my father said something that caught me completely off guard. He stated he was proud of me for making the decision to travel and pursue my interests. It was a simple comment, but coming from him felt significant. My father has never been one for lengthy emotional conversations, so hearing him accept my choices like that was more significant than he probably understood. It was unexpected support, but it strengthened my belief that I was on the right track. As the weeks passed, I noticed a change in the way my family interacted with me. My mother still made the occasional remark about Kevin, but she quickly caught herself and changed the conversation. It wasn't ideal, but it represented development. More significantly, I wasn't allowing it to affect me in the same way it did before. I finally felt in control of how much their comments influenced me. Then, something unexpected occurred. A few weeks after returning home, Stella and I met at a local art event. We had known each other since college, but I had not seen her in years. She was now a photographer, and we instantly connected over our mutual passion for creative work. We swapped numbers, and before I knew it, we were meeting for coffee later that week. It didn't take long for me to experience something I hadn't felt in a long time, a genuine spark. Around the same time, Kevin called me from Italy. He seemed more cheerful than I had ever heard him. He discussed his trips and the great experiences he'd had. He even said that he had no intention of returning to law. Instead, he was thinking about a passion project he had always wanted to pursue, writing a travel book. Hearing him talk about his future with joy rather than stress was a welcome shift, and I found myself cheering for him wholeheartedly. There was no tension or conflict between us anymore. We were just two people figuring out our own paths. Stella and I hit it off right away after that first coffee date. She was encouraging, positive, and truly interested in my work. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was with someone who accepted me for who I was, rather than comparing me to others. It was invigorating, and the relationship began to progress naturally. We spent more time together. And as I got to know her better, I understood how much she influenced my creativity. When I introduced Stella to my mother, she instantly asked, "What does she do for a living?" Normally, the inquiry would have made me feel compelled to justify or explain myself, but I didn't feel that way this time. I simply informed her that Stella was a photographer and that I was satisfied with her. My mother must have realized that pushing any further was not going to be successful because she dropped the subject, something that would never have happened previously. A few weeks later, I was presented with another significant opportunity. I was hired by a technology company to manage a design team on a big rebranding. It was the type of job I never imagined I'd be trusted with, and it felt like all of my efforts were finally paying off. I announced the news on an entrepreneurship forum, and the response was phenomenal. I couldn't help but think about how far I had gone from my initial venting post. Speaking of reflection, I published another Reddit post outlining the previous few months and how everything had changed. My relationship with my family, my closeness with Kevin, and my newfound confidence. It all felt like part of a journey that I could finally be proud of. The post went viral, garnering thousands of comments and upvotes from those who had been following along from the start. It was humbling, but also validating, to see how many people connected with my story. Stella had a significant impact on my creativity. Her photography inspired me to try new techniques in my design work, and we began working on little projects together. I felt like my work had gained new depth and purpose since we started dating, and I was excited to see where our cooperation would lead us. I'm now focused on the future. I intend to grow my freelance career, pursue new creative opportunities with Stella, and establish healthy boundaries with my family. I'm not completely healed from the years of comparison, but I'm on the right path. I can feel significant changes coming, and I'm ready for whatever happens next. After discovering my stepmom's secret Reddit account, I learned she hates me and my siblings, and it's completely shattered our family. Original post July 17, 2024. I'm really pissed off and want to vent. I even cried reading the things she said, and I don't know what to do. I don't need any advice, I just want to vent. My father has been married to my stepmother for 5 years. He has been divorced from my mother since my younger brother was 2 years old. There is no beef between them and they have a great co-parenting. I have a 17-year-old sister, a 16-year-old brother, and I'm 25. Then my father has a 3-year-old son with my stepmother. I found her Reddit account in a pretty random way. Since I'm only home on the weekends, I let her use my computer. She forgot to close her email. She doesn't post too much but she comments too much. I was honestly going to close the email but it caught my attention that all the replies were from step parents subreddit, so curiosity won me over. I know, it's not a good thing to do and curiosity killed the cat. The first thing I saw was her last post in which she detailed things about my life in a random Reddit sub, criticizing my decisions and even lying to get people to support her. She has posts on that site talking about how happy she feels when my siblings are not at home. My sister adores her. But she has comments talking about how she can't wait for them to turn 18 and leave the house because she just wants to share the house with her family, my father and her toddler. It seems that she doesn't see us as her family. She has a lot of comments answering other people that it's totally okay to not love your stepchildren because they're not family and it's okay not to consider them one. She has comments talking about how much it bothers her when my dad and brother have sleepovers. They just watch a series in the playroom and then go to sleep, as she is tired of hearing the laughter of a teenager and can't wait until we all leave the house so my father can be with his real family. But what she hates the most is having to learn sign language for my little sister. It had always seemed strange to me that SM still struggles with sign language, but now I know that she never really put in the effort to learn. My sister always said that for many people sign language is very difficult, so I never said anything. But now I know that she always found stupid to learn how to communicate with my sister when my sister always tried to help her. I was too surprised by the hatred she has when my father spends time with me and my sister. Her jealousy towards us is so obvious that it disgusts me that there were so many people who told her how they feel the same way about their SDs. To the point of sexualizing things. My siblings are not problem children. They even love her very much, and what fills me with anger the most is that she is so false in front of us. Do you know the number of times I offered to babysit my stepbrother so she and my dad can go on a date? All those times she refused to let me take care of him, but now I saw comments that she left about how I am living at my father's house and I don't help her at all, only for other people to respond saying that she should give my father an ultimatum to make me leave because I'm too old to live with him and he has a new family. I cook my food, do my laundry, share a room with my sister, I help my father pay the bills while she doesn't, and only come home on the weekends because I'm doing a police academy also full week. I don't even care if I'm making too obvious who I am. It was my father who told me to move back with him so that when I come back from the academy on Friday nights it will be a shorter trip. She sexualizes my interactions with my father, saying that it is not normal for me to sleep a nap hugging him and that I should know my place. He is my father. What the hell wrong with her? I'm so disgusted. Relevant comments. Grumble gal, this, show your father what she really thinks of you all. Because once you're all eventually out and she gets her wish, she's going to work double time to keep it that way and isolate him. Accurate neck. 6933. You won't get any inheritance. She will make sure of it. OOP, I don't think my father has anything to inherit to us. We all lose in that OOP on why she is in the police academy. OP, I live in a third world country. Half of my colleagues are women in vulnerable situations. The only way out they found was to get into the police because here you get free healthcare, education and money. Women who have left their children to walk forward in the only way they found. You demonstrate your privilege by criticizing and being judgmental about someone just because of their work without knowing everything behind it all. OOP on if she has had a relationship with her stepmom and if they have talked on a regular basis. OOP, honestly, I would have taken the time to sit down with her and chat about how she feels before I knew all of this. She's had years to adjust. But now? I don't give a shit about what feels a person who says I want to fuck my own father and that learning sign language is a waste of her time when my sister feels bad for not being able to communicate with her too much after years. Nothing justifies being jealous of a daughter with her father, nothing justifies her comments. It's one thing to say you're stressed and another to make up things on the internet about your stepdaughter. I deleted the post, July 17, 2024. Hi, I decided to delete the post because for now I can't tell anyone what happened because I'll basically be locked up in the academy until Friday morning. In fact, I shouldn't even be using my cell phone now. Someone with too much free time shared the situation in that sub of step parents to warn my SM. I have screenshots of everything, including a video showing that it is her email and showing the comments. If she sees that post, what will she do? Delete the account? I already have the proof. But I don't want my siblings to find out before I tell them, and I know that those types of posts usually end up in those TikTok that re-upload posts without permission, so I prefer to delete the post so that it doesn't stand out even more. Although my siblings don't use Reddit or that kind of content. I'm going to post again in that sub when I talk about everything with my family, so I hope Redditors know how to keep the secret of the post for now. I know they won't, hahaha. Being a stepmom is hard. Yes, One thing is feeling that you're having a hard time, and another totally different thing is making a post saying that you hate it when your stepdaughter is around her father because you think she's going to *ck him, TF. It is not the same to say being a step-parent is stressful, than to say honestly learning SL is unnecessary. BC when the girl turns 18 I will not see her again. It is a waste of time since she can read lips. Also some people complained about me hugging my dad. I also take a nap hugging my mother or my siblings. I'm sorry for having a family that loves me and are not perverts who see a hug as something sexual. Probably next week I will be able to maybe give an update. The academy keeps me working almost all day. Comments elegant_crab_7500. Oh honey, my heart breaks for you. You do though, sound very mature and responsible. I have helped my sister raise my niece who is now 23 and is totally alienated from her dad, who left my sister for his now wife when my niece was only 10 months old. And step-family because her stepmom is much like yours but has done far worse things but then in a narcissistic way blamed it on my sister and I. My niece acts very tough and nonchalant about it, but a good few months ago, we were watching Hope Floats, and she just burst into tears sobbing, "Why doesn't Dad love me? What did I do wrong?" There is no perfect outcome for this sadly, but I do feel that she needs to know that you know, and so do your mom and siblings. If possible, do it in a calm factual way that protects your integrity. From my experience, do not respond and/or mirror or act like her. Always maintain your dignity and equilibrium in spite of what people here might say. Always maintain the upper hand. My sister and I did not, and sadly reacted to a lot of what my niece's stepmom did with rage. She, as any good narcissist, would in turn use this against us. I talked with my siblings and my mom, July 20th, 2024. Hi, for now I'm going to post this little update here since I haven't spoken to my father yet, but I spoke with my siblings and mom. I told my dad that I was staying at a friend's house when I left the academy, but I actually went to my mom's house and told her everything. She doesn't even know what Reddit is, that site isn't used too much here. But I translated the comments and posts for her, I showed her the videos and my mom was furious. I explained to her that in the comments it's Madre Biologica. I was confused about it too the first time I read that, also with SM. So my SM also made comments and posts complaining about my mother being that they have always had a cordial treatment. But still my SM was lying saying that my mother was troublesome. No one in the comments said anything. Everyone supported her and they recommended that she should move far away with her legal family. Far away from the problematic BM and kids. First we told my brother, who was also upset and said that she was a fake but that he has seen her ignore my sister and pretend that she does not see or hear her a lot of times. He explained that like me it also seems strange to him that SM has not yet learned sign language. My siblings spend a lot of time at my father's house. Just like English or Spanish, sign language is much easier to learn if you live with someone who uses it every day, therefore it is strange that SM doesn't use it. He said that even my father has offered to pay for her classes but she says she doesn't have time. We asked him if he noticed any other behavior of that kind and he said that SM doesn't let him take care of our younger brother, which she also does with me, but curiously she does let our sister take care of him, so I don't understand that. Other than that, she's never treated him badly or anything like that. At the time of telling my sister she was the most hurt, she cried especially because of SM's comments towards me calling me a whore. It's kind of ironic how the comments towards her affected me and the comments towards me affected her, haha. Something that my sister noticed that I didn't is that almost all of SM's comments are criticizing me, my sister and even my mother, but my brother she has only criticized sleepovers or when he comes back late from being with his friends. But she has criticized my and my sister's clothes, made up things about my life, confessed that she hates it when we hug our father, she said we're too clingy. She talked badly about my mother, etc. My sister said it's sexist and maybe she's got some mental problem. My sister said she always believed SM didn't really hear her and she maybe wasn't speaking well and didn't understand her. I think that's the shittiest thing of all. My sister's greatest pride is being able to pronounce some words no matter how short they are or if they sound like noise for some people. We understand her, but SM made her feel insecure every time she ignored her. I know that my sister always justified that by believing that it was her mistake and that SM made an effort to learn but it was simply more difficult for her, but now we know that no, she was never interested in learning. I'm getting mad again as I write this, sorry. My mother said she was going to talk to both of them, mainly because even though it's an anonymous site, SM's way of expressing herself is sick and she's not going to let my siblings be around someone like that. Oh, but she's venting, being a stepmom is lonely. I received comments like that. It's not the same to say I feel lonely and I feel stressed, than to say my stepdaughter behaves like a slut, just because me and my minor sister uses a bikini for the pool. Her account is old, She's been leaving comments like that for years. With lies, with complaints we never heard before. It's just messed up. We arranged that we're going to tell our father all together and show him everything, so we're probably going to tell him tomorrow because I need to leave for the academy on Monday. My SM account has not been deleted. It's crazy how she makes things up to get approval from strangers. At this point, I don't even know if she's crazy or a mythomaniac. I would like to go back to her email since the password is saved, but I don't know if she will receive a notification of that because this time I closed the account. Update, July 22, 2024. We talked to my father over the weekend. For now he is staying at my mother's house. It is a complicated situation since in the middle of everything is my half-sibling too. During the weekend I went to my father's house and the first thing I did was tell my stepmom separately that I've seen her Reddit account and I'm going to talk about it with my dad. She told me that I can't condemn her for something she uses as an intimate diary, but I told her that this is not a diary, it is a social network where she makes her problems and lies public. If someone other than me discovered her account, then what was going to happen? Were they going to believe all the things she invented? If her identity was revealed on that account by someone else, I would have too many problems and could even be kicked out of the academy. Again, there's a big difference between saying I'm stressed and, my stepdaughters behave like sluts around their father. I simply told her that my mother and sister also know it and would come to talk about it too. She for obvious reasons just went to lock herself in her room not wanting to talk with me. Once we talked to my father, I showed him most of the posts and comments. There were so many crazy comments that I think it would take me too long to read them all because they were just so long too. She's that kind of people who comments the bio of their lives in the posts of other people. My father got angry. My SM never expressed having a single problem with us like that. The situation would be different if we knew what she thinks about us. My father went to look for my SM, who refused to talk about it and was mostly angry with me for violating her privacy. My father told her that she's insane for thinking that my sister and I sexually provoked him, that he can't believe the way she talks about my sister and the happiness she expresses every time my sister goes to the hospital and is not home. How she expresses to be counting the days until my sibling stops going to the house forever. My father told her that she knew that he is a father and that he would never leave us aside. She made her decision, and even so, instead of talking about her problems, she decided to create an account to play at being a victim. She said she needs a place to vent, but he told her that venting is not the same as telling lies. Venting is not the same as hating your stepdaughters and talking horrible things about them, and she could have spoken about it and not just lied. They argued a lot, but it didn't get anywhere because she kept defending herself, and my father only told her that it was over. My mother told my father that she is not going to let my sister and brother be around a woman who is clearly mentally unstable because no normal person thinks like that. After arguing too much and even trying to make SM understand that what she did is wrong, she just justified herself all the time. My father went with us and told her that he is going to come back just to see my brother every day, but that he no longer trusts her and never saw that side of her. She lied for so many years. Nothing really went as I expected. I think I at least hoped that she could apologize, but I think she doesn't even think that what she did is wrong. In her mind, everything was totally justified because being a stepmother is difficult, but nothing justifies her being so cruel and poisonous. But yeah, that's what happened. I think it's hurtful to know that someone can hide that much darkness inside. I wasn't too close with her, but I liked her, to the point of sharing my clothes and things with her, so I also feel sad about it. Mostly for my dad. Me gustaría simplemente decir que ella está demente, pero creo que eso daría espacio a justificar su comportamiento. Ella simplemente es una víbora de dos cabezas. Editor's note. Translation. I would like to just say that she is insane, but I think that would give room to justify her behavior. She is simply a two-headed viper. Relevant comments. Not so religious now. Is her account still up or did she delete everything? She's absolutely insane and a narcissist if she can't see that what she did was wrong. I hope it all works out for you guys. Stay strong. OOP. The last time I looked it was still there. I have her email password saved on my computer, so if she doesn't delete it I'll tell my sister to do it for me. Some people told me that they have recognized some of her comments, so yes I will delete the account if she doesn't de-kill the messenger one. Wow, just wow. You think you know someone and then 1 second, bam, I am so sorry you and your family are dealing with this. SM is off her rocker. Does she need constant attention and approval? She needs therapy and most likely the whole family because this is a traumatic event and major trust issues are now forming. Stay well, stay strong. OP, new updates. Little tiny update, August 25, 2024, 1 month later. Hello. It's been a while and I honestly forgot to make an update. Not many things have happened, but I just want to update for people who were worried. My younger brother has been visiting us. Our father still lives at my mother's house. Luckily, my stepmom lets my dad bring him home some days of the week and on weekends. I deleted her account weeks ago. She didn't tell me anything about it or if she saw any TikTok or post about this. Maybe now she's afraid to use Reddit or something like that. I only deleted the posts, but there were too many comments and I honestly didn't want to waste my time deleting them one by one. I'm not sure if comments are automatically deleted with the account as well. I'm not going to talk too much about her and my father's relationship, but she continues to deny that she did anything wrong and has a very misogynistic way of thinking about women, and apparently she does not intend to change her way of thinking. It's too crazy how now we know her dark side, but at the same time she's still her with my little brother and even my father. My father is separated from her for now because he doesn't have money to pay for the divorce. She said that if they come back together she will not let me enter her house after what I did, so my father decided to stop trying with her. I have no idea what legal arrangement they have on the house or what will happen when they divorce, but I guess my father is going to leave the house to her and he's going to find another place to rent in order for my younger brother to suffer as little stress as possible from a separation. For a toddler, moving is a lot of anxiety, so it's better for him to stay comfortable in his place. I wouldn't have any problem with that, and neither would my siblings. I prefer my brother to have a home and suffer as little as possible from the separation. So yes, that has happened. I'm surprised that a month has passed. I feel like it's been 7 years, but these kinds of serious processes last month, so nothing interesting or anything like that has happened. For now, I'm glad my little brother can be with us. Update 2, October 5th, 2024, 1.5 months later. Hello, it's been a while since I last posted here. I just wanted to give one last update before leaving this for a few months, since things like divorces take a lot of time and long processes, much more so when minors are involved. If my father and SM agree on everything, the divorce process can be finished in 3 months, but if not, it can last up to a year. It all depends on them. This will probably be a pretty boring update, but I want to reassure people who are worried about me and my siblings. My father has screenshots of everything, even the video of me entering her stepmom account from her email on my computer. I don't think it will do much good during divorce since internet laws are a gray area here, but it's always better for him to have that just in case. Needless to say, SM will be in maybe 3 months, if everything goes well. Officially only my little brother's mother and no more my SM. Luckily she lets my little brother come to my mother's house and spend time with my father and us as always. He comes almost every day of the week. My father is going to leave the house to her so that the divorce will be the least stressful for my brother. At one point my father wanted to ask her to let me stay there on the weekends when I come back from the academy, but I told him not to do that. Honestly, I'm afraid to wake up and find her on the end of the bed looking at me like misery. I don't want to share a house with her at all. The only and last time I had a conversation with SM again, I asked her if she wasn't ashamed of anything and she totally ignored me. I think the most affected by this was my sister, who feels she has suffered discrimination from our stepmother, and I honestly believe her. My sister has told us about some situations that she let go of but now realizes were micro-discriminatory behaviors against her. Although they were not things like making fun of her in front of her face, there are microaggressions that we often decide to ignore, but they are done with malice. For example, my brother said that SM once said that my father's sons salen bien del horno. At the time he took it as a random comment. Maybe we are overthinking. But now he thinks it was something with double intention towards me and my sister, like saying that we didn't come out well. Again, things we like to ignore and think, nah, it was just a random comment. She has never apologized. She has the kind of mentality that the husband is only the wife's man and the partner comes before the children, which in my opinion is bullshit because she's only jealous of me and my sister. Imagine being jealous of your husband's daughters. SM strongly believes that she didn't do anything wrong except not to have written that in a secret diary. At least she now admits that. Maybe in 10 years she will realize everything else. My father, for obvious reasons, has gotten tired of trying to talk to her in a mature way, so they are going to divorce, and I guess she expected it because she didn't make any fuss nor anything like that. Divorces are a long and expensive process, so for now my parents, and SM too, at least she's a good mother to her own son, are focusing on not letting my younger brother feel those chaotic vibes, and my parents are taking care to not let my sister feel too bad either. They will go for joint custody since my father could not take care of my little brother 24/7 because of his work, and anyway they would not give him to him since he does not have a house or all the things that the courts ask for. I think the least affected by all this is my other brother, who is in dad, she's a bitch. Just find another girlfriend mode, but I guess that's how teenagers are. Anyway, there were people who found some of the posts or even comments which surprised me, lol. I've also been getting harassment from people from that sub, but know that I've already deleted the account. Congratulations to those who found the account. My childhood best friend's boyfriend raped me 10 years ago. I kept quiet but revealed it when they got married, so everyone blames me. I kept quiet for 10 years, but I told them the truth when they were married. Now everyone blames me for speaking up. Please bear with me as I provide a brief backstory. Growing up, I, F27, had a childhood friend named Angie, F27, who was as close as a genuine sister. We spent entire weekends at each other's homes, celebrating family occasions together. When my parents divorced, I lived with her from the age of 6 until 18. I learned to speak some Russian because she is Russian, and she learnt some Spanish. Needless to say, her older brother and younger sister felt like family to me. During our teenage years, Angie had two male best pals. She began seeing one of them, and the other, Nico, now 29, who was also Russian, is the person I began dating when I was 17. Growing up, I struggled with a cardiac ailment. I won't bore you with the details, but I needed to take a number of medications. Starting at the age of 16, I became healthier and no longer needed to take them on a daily basis, except when my heart rate became irregular. However, when this occurred, it became exceedingly painful. My heart would cramp and I would begin to hyperventilate. All of my pals, including Nico, were aware of this, and they also understood that combining my medications with alcohol would cause me to black out. As a result, I didn't smoke or drink much while growing up. I was concerned about my health and only drank at home or in a safe environment. Here, the legal drinking age is 16, and I rarely drank anything other than wine or beer. I had sex for the first time with Nico when I was 17. 2 weeks later, while my parents were at a retreat, he came over for a date night. I had one glass of wine, but then I began experiencing health problems, which led to me taking my medication and going asleep. The next morning, I felt a little sore, but I didn't give it much thought. 2 weeks later, I informed Nico that my menstruation was late. He panicked and confessed to having sex with me while I was unconscious. We'd done it before, so he didn't think much about it. He didn't have a condom, but since I was on the pill, he assumed it was fine. He also stated that he did not come into me, but rather in a tissue. I felt violated and disgusted by myself. I didn't know how to convey it, so I merely told Angie. I was a complete wreck for a few years and couldn't have sex until 2 years later. I didn't recall any of it, but I was too embarrassed to tell my mother or anyone else. I didn't consider it rape at the time because I was too young to grasp what had happened and how I'd been assaulted. Angie assured me that everything was fine and that if I felt horrible about it, I should end our relationship. But because we were in a relationship and had sex before, I felt conflicted. I eventually broke up with him the next day. Nico and Angie were close and spent a lot of time together, so he must have cried to her about his broken heart. After a few months, I felt compelled to see him whenever I visited her. I explained that I couldn't see him, but she didn't comprehend. Eventually, the contact ended and we haven't texted or seen each other in years. I continue to follow her and her family on social media. I noticed that her brother was expecting his first child. Because I was incredibly close to her family, I replied on the Instagram post to offer my happiness. He contacted me thereafter. I had missed his wedding, but he wanted to know whether I would be interested in attending the baby shower, as we hadn't spoken in years and were formerly very close. He told me I was like his third little sister. I asked Nico if he would be attending, as Angie and he had been dating for 9 years, and he replied sure. I didn't say much, but I offered to send him a modest gift if he could give me his current address. I mentioned that I would not be attending. He kept nagging me about what occurred all those years ago and why I'm no longer in their lives. Angie told her family that I couldn't see her since she was seeing my ex, but her brother suspected more. This is when I believed I could be honest. I told him the truth about what occurred back then. While I didn't realize it at 17, I now know it was rape, and I referred to it as such. I didn't hear back from him, but Angie contacted me a few days later, furious. Nico had intended to propose at the baby shower, but Angie's brother is now opposed after learning why I stopped communicating. She informed me she loves Nico and intends to stay with him, but her brother said she is no longer a part of his life. He does not want his baby girl to be raised by a rapist's family. Since then, I've received messages from former high school acquaintances telling me that I should have ignored it and not told anyone. They claim that because I didn't speak up back then, I've lost my right to do so now, and that I'm a terrible person for causing problems. Someone's life has been damaged because of something he did as a child 10 years ago. Is it really my fault for speaking up? Comments where OP has replied. The OP responds to comments regarding her right to speak up, stating that she now realizes it was rape. But we grew up in a little town of about 5,000 people, and I'm not sure what would have happened if I had spoken up. He was 19 at the time, 2 years older, and everyone knows everything about everyone else. It would have had a significant influence back then, just as it does today. They all still reside there, and word has spread. That is why so many of our former classmates, the majority of whom still reside in the area, are contacting us. They've left me furious texts. They've known Nico their entire lives and are sticking by him. When I was 20, I moved out, and my mother departed soon after. We didn't keep in touch with most folks. It still aches my heart to receive such a violent response from people who were my entire childhood. Thank you for all of your well wishes, I sincerely appreciate it. OP, Nico ruined his own life, not mine. I recognize that he is responsible for what transpired. The pushback I'm getting is because he appears to be a different guy now, and Angie believes that what he did as a youngster shouldn't ruin his life. Angie also says it has nothing to do with her brother's daughter. I'm not sure if Nico will ever act out or do anything, but it doesn't change what happened to me. Thank you for confirming this. I can't stop feeling awful about the repercussions. While I do not want to see Nico or Angie, I am at peace with what happened to me back then. Commenter, but why are they assaulting you rather than the brother? You are not the one who objects to the marriage. To be honest, it all feels like misogyny and victim blaming. OP, I suppose since he is family and I am the outsider who has ruined their family. I've received numerous messages from people who previously did not have my phone number. I'm blocking as many as I can, but it's difficult not to allow these remarks get to you. Commenter, NTA. They got together so quickly after the two of you split up. I can't help but think if your friend was encouraging you to abandon your relationship with Nico because she had always wanted to be with him. OP, I really don't believe that. They've known one other for years, and she broke up with her boyfriend 2 weeks before I ended my relationship with Nico. It is a small village of approximately 5,000 people. Even with pupils our age from adjacent villages, our school had just 500 students. The possibilities were extremely limited. Update, September 15, 2024. First and foremost, I'm grateful to everyone who took the time to read my tale and leave comments. I read over every comment and attempted to respond to as many as possible. It offered me a glimmer of hope for compassion toward rape victims, as well as the confidence to resist the hostility I faced. Mental update. Reading all of the letters justifying my decision to speak up made me realize how insecure I was about what I was permitted to do and how much I was trying to make things right for people other than myself. This notably applied to Nico and Angie. All of you are correct. If Nico had truly changed, he would have apologized, reached out, or attempted to make amends in some way, either when word reached him from his brother-in-law or earlier in his life. Angie, my former best friend, should have felt sympathy if she respected me as a person or the time we spent together. Her reactions taught me not to hesitate in my actions. I began going to therapy at the age of 21 and felt I had moved on from the rape as much as possible, but I realized how humiliated I am almost 10 years later for an act that was completely out of my control. I was embarrassed to speak up back then, and I was frightened that the people around me might react differently. I still felt guilty about speaking up today, so I've been trying to accept what happened to me and not apologize for other people's actions, especially when they don't even respect me. Since then, I preserved all unwanted WhatsApp messages for future reference. Angie's mother contacted me the next day, crying. I shouldn't have answered the phone, but during our 10-year friendship, I considered her an aunt, almost a second mother. She used to joke that as her children ran around the house, I would always take the time to drink tea and converse with her, giving her more love and attention than her actual children. While she apologized for what had happened and what I had been through as a youngster, she couldn't believe I would ruin Angie's happiness over something like that. Angie's brother's refusal to accept Nico as a member of the family, and Angie's support for Nico, has divided their family, and she is distraught. She has grown to adore Nico as if he were a family member, and she regards him as nothing more than a nice young guy who she hopes will bring her daughter happiness. It wasn't aggressive or unpleasant language, just a heartbroken mother who claimed to understand my pain while still seeing flaws in me. Angie's mother tried to persuade me to apologize or retract what I said, but I refused since I don't see any blame in myself. Despite everything that has transpired, I feel Nico has not changed and is simply hiding it better. He sees how people are sticking by him and supporting his actions, so he sees no reason to change, which I didn't want to encourage. Angie's mother never used the word rape. I tried to correct her every time she mentioned it, naming it so she could better comprehend, but she only started crying harder. It didn't make sense for us to keep chatting. Angie's mother used to communicate with my mother, and after our chat, she reached out to her. I was terrified my mother would find out because she comes from a very conservative background. We had a long conversation, and while I haven't met her in person yet, she apologized for not being there for me and not making me feel like I could communicate to her. I attempted to calm her down as much as I could, But when she inquired if my current boyfriend knew I was used like that, I became enraged. She was afraid my partner would abandon me if he found out, meaning that what had transpired made me less valuable or appealing. I hung up after she urged me to keep it a secret from our family both abroad and in our country. She was acting just as I had feared she would, as if it were something shameful. It was especially difficult because I am working hard to overcome my feelings of shame. She has now apologized, but it is evident that her attitude toward me has altered. I'm not sure how to handle it yet, but it's something to be concerned about in the coming weeks. As some of you suggested, I wrote Angie's brother, Sven, again to apologize for the mess, but I'm glad it's out in the open. I also told him how proud I was that he was defending his family. I asked if his old email address still worked since I wanted to send him a gift card. He did not react, but I received a message from his wife 2 days ago. She thanked me for coming out and notifying them about Nico. Apparently, there were a couple times that made her uncomfortable. Some jokes Nico told, and in retrospect, she understands why. Sven allegedly notified her as soon as he received my initial SMS, and they have both since seen Angie but not Nico. She refuses to remain in the same room or house with him, as does their unborn daughter. Sven and Angie's mother has visited them several times, pleading with them to forgive Nico, and Sven has given in little. Angie and Nico will marry, and Sven will attend, but not his wife. Nico is welcome in the family, but is not permitted to communicate with Sven's wife or daughter. These restrictions do not apply to Angie. Sven has been suffering while attempting to assuage his mother's concerns, and he is unable to take a position and cut them out totally. This is the compromise they made without his wife's approval, and she told me she is doing everything she can to cut them out of their lives indefinitely. She wants to be closer to her family as well, and she believes this is the perfect opportunity, but she is unsure if she can follow through. His wife apologized profusely for all of the problems I've had, and it's been a difficult situation for them. Sven understands that it is not my fault, but he prefers not to communicate. It's difficult for him to speak with or see my name because, while he knows I'm not the guilty party, I was the bearer of terrible news, and he sees me as the beginning of all this drama. She told me several times that neither she nor Sven think I'm the evil guy, they're just fatigued from everything, and it's been incredibly difficult on them. That is all that has transpired thus far. I'm frustrated with how everything came to be. Nico appears to be going about his business without regard for the consequences. I didn't want him to suffer, but I guess part of me wanted an apology for all the pain I had endured. Now I have to deal with my mother's changed, ashamed opinion of me. Even though I'm relieved that it's all over, it's difficult for me to stick to my decisions. Throughout this journey, my spouse and best friend have both provided a shoulder to cry on. My best friend has been outraged for me, and I'm delighted to have both of them by my side. Right now, I'm simply emotionally spent, but I'm sure it will improve after a few weeks. My wife is delusional, believing she is pregnant with twins despite negative tests. She also thinks I am going to abandon her and our children. This is all over the place. I really need help. My wife and I, M42, have been married for 2 years together for 15. All this time we had either not decided to have kids or had problems getting pregnant. After some medical testing we found out that it was near impossible to get pregnant due to some medical issues with her. We were thinking of adopting when one day she came home and told me she was expecting. Of course I was super happy. A week later we had an appointment at the gyno and she had some blood drawn. The test came back negative and of course I was devastated, but she wasn't. She claimed that she was pregnant and that the doctor was wrong. We took some more store-bought ones and they all came back negative. My wife is in complete denial. Now she claims we are having twins. She is buying them clothes and decorations and is pressuring me to start with the nursery. I am at a loss and don't know what to do. My inaction is making her believe that I want to leave them and that I am going to doom my wife into the life of a single mom. What the F is even happening? I love her but I don't know what to do. Edit, forgot to add. I have tried talking her into therapy but she accuses me of gaslighting her. Little update, edit. Thank you guys, you really helped me out. Yesterday was a bad day and you helped me get clarity. I've had a chat with our doctor who will now be handling this with us. I would like to thank most of you with useful advice and hopefully I will be able to update good news someday. But a fuck you to those that said I should divorce her because she is crazy, and an extra fuck you to the guy that used this post to push his anti-abortion agenda. Comments deleted. Call the doctor who did the pregnancy tests and leave a message with the emergency number. They will be able to tell you who to contact. She's obviously had some sort of mental break. Just an FYI, at 19 weeks you would have had ultrasound pictures and gender determination and she would have had several OBGYN visits. Is she doing practical things like taking prenatal vitamins and reading books, or is it all delusional and talk? Just wondering how far she is taking this scenario. Oh, OP, I know. Also, she isn't showing at all. She is thin as always. Yes, she says that she can't lift heavy things, says she has pregnancy cravings, she buys clothes for the twins, she is even planning to take paid time off from work for when the babies are here. Deleted. This is really frightening. Like those stories of people taking babies from a pregnant woman. You need to get her help ASAP. Was she all of a sudden 19 weeks, or has this been going on a while? What spurred her into thinking she was initially pregnant? Have you seen her have her period at this time so you can point out the obvious? OOP, she claimed she was pregnant about a few weeks ago. But as of Friday she says she entered her 19th week. I really don't know what brought her to think that so-called pizza. Oh dude. She's going through something very, very serious. You need to contact a therapist. Like turn off Reddit right now and contact one. She's having delusional thoughts. Her preoccupation with pregnancy and her sadness have overcome her. This is way beyond Reddit's pay grade. Good luck. OOP. I have tried talking her into therapy and she shuts down 100% and accuses me of gaslighting her panda jinx. This sounds like it could be a pseudo-pregnancy. I learned about this in our OBGYN basic science portion of med school. Never saw it mentioned again outside our textbook, but it's a very real psychological phenomena. It can happen in animals too. Usually an ultrasound to show that the uterus is empty is curative. Devastating but curative. She needs help from an OBGYN and a psychiatrist. You're probably going to need to start with an OBGYN because she'll be in denial about it being a psych issue but would go to an OBGYN for her pregnancy. Give the OBGYN a heads up before the appointment about what you're dealing with and they can help with a plan to put a psych consult in motion. Involuntary if need be, but again, the ultrasound could shake her back. You should know that she'll mourn the loss, likely as if it was a real loss of twins. Good luck OP. Update. 7 days later. I called up our primary doctor and told him about the problem. He seemed very concerned and wanted us to come see him the next morning. He said it was important to be gentle but not feed into her delusions. I sat her down and we talked. All she wanted to talk about is when I would get the nursery started and that we were on a time crunch, and how she has found a perfect color for the room, how she wants me to be more involved in her pregnancy. I tried to be very calm, but I was very perturbed by seeing her that way. I asked her to go to the doctor with me tomorrow. She said yes, that she wanted to check on the babies either way. Now I took some advice and words you gave me about being calm and asking a bit why she thinks she is pregnant without calling her delusional. So I did. She kept changing subjects or saying that a mother just feels it. You wouldn't know how it is. Then I said that I loved her really much, that I would never think of leaving her, but we needed to go to the doctor to confirm her gut feeling. She got very agitated and was crying, telling me that if I wanted to leave her I should simply leave, but I shouldn't call her a liar. Somehow I managed to calm her down enough for her to go to sleep. After she did, I went on her computer. I never snoop on her. But I remembered a commenter pointing out forums about cryptic pregnancy, and so I went for the look. Oh boy. She was in 2 Facebook groups. One was a normal mommy Facebook group and the other was a group about women that believed they were pregnant. In the normal group she would post updates about her symptoms and pictures of her belly, and her story about how she was almost not able to have children, but that's to the grace of God that kissed her tummy, the gift of life was given to her. And how she was compensated for all this years of suffering with twins. In the other group the women were quite literally, and excuse me here, fucking insane. They were feeding into each other's delusions. A woman said that she was almost 2 years pregnant and how sometimes it just takes longer. My wife would post there complaining about doctors that do not take her seriously and about me. So many women were making her fear that I would leave. Saying things like men cannot stick to a woman. Many recounted their stories about how their marriages broke down because their spouses could not handle the pregnancy. I was really fucking scared. I researched phantom pregnancies and I read somewhere that that could also be a sign of schizophrenia. So to say the least I could not sleep. I was and am still very afraid of losing her. She woke up and I tried to act like nothing was wrong. We were going to the doctor. And it was as if nothing had happened yesterday. She was convinced that we were going to a pregnancy checkup. Things got really bad when we began talking to the doctor. He was really tactful when talking to my wife. He tried to explain to her that it was medically impossible that she was pregnant. We tried to show her tests, the ultrasound we did the day before, but nothing. She got more agitated and began to cry and scream at me for making her look like a crazy person. She began bouncing back and forth and holding her head with both hands. We could not calm her and she went into a full-on panic attack. She could not breathe. The doctor laid her down and tried giving her some medicine for her to relax, but it did not help as he didn't have the necessary tools to treat a panic attack that was that bad. She had to go to the hospital where they took care of her. Did an EKG to exclude that she was suffering a heart attack. At that point I really had no other option than to inquire about involuntary commit. So I could not do it myself. I needed my doctor's statement that she was a danger to herself and others, and he had to initiate the process of an involuntary examination of 72 hours. After that, we will have to submit a written statement to the court to determine whether or not she can stay there against her will. So far I have submitted all her posts in both Facebook groups as well as the test we did with timestamps when possible. My wife is 2 days in the 3 days examination and I have no contact to her. When I last her she was furious with me. She said I was taking away her freedom. I feel horrible, dirty and useless. She is so mad at me. I feel like I'm abandoning her and don't know how she will ever forgive me this. I love her with all my heart. I am afraid of what will happen if the courts decide that I can't commit her. How our life will be affected. I feel like I failed to protect her. At this point I am just rambling. Sorry for the long post, I guess I just need to vent because I have no one else to really turn to that just wants to listen. I feel judged by everyone and pitied. I just hate it. Sorry for spelling mistakes, edit. I will not fucking leave my wife, you unempathetic dickheads. When I gave my vows I meant through illness and bad times. I am not only on the ride for the good times. If you truly love someone you will do whatever it takes to see them healthy again. Would you leave your spouse if they went through a severe physical illness? I am here to stay. I will not divorce her. She is not a fucking psycho, she is sick. I hope no one of your loved ones ever has to go through this because their support net will consist of cowardly dickheads. Sorry for the rant. But if you want to say something in line divorce that nut, don't even bother. I understand people that make the choice to leave if the situation when it begins to mess with their mental health, and I respect that, but I won't do that. Edit 2, my wife didn't have a heart attack. She was examined because panic attacks register with similar symptoms as heart attacks. I don't exactly know what our doctor gave her as I was so distraught, but I was not a sedative. I think it was something along the lines of Valium or Baldrian. Over-the-counter stuff mostly. She has a family. She is estranged from most of them. Her sister is now at our place to help. Also refrain from such stupid comments like, I'll bet she will leave, bro. She is crazy, how did you marry her? Because they are not helpful at all. Especially the bets that are going on that my wife will leave me once she gets better. Just seems like you want me to divorce. Get a life. Comments, deleted. I used to work in the involuntary commitment system. Everyone is upset with their loved ones when they get committed. Everyone. And it's a normal thing for family members and partners to feel a ton of guilt. But your wife needs help. You took the steps to get her that help even though it was scary. You will not regret this. Hoping 1357911 I had to involuntarily commit my husband. He has PTSD and I got a phone call at work 40 minutes away in a different county saying that he loved me and that I shouldn't feel bad. I had to call 911 bawling my eyes out knowing he was having a bad week and then call the emergency line for the county he was in. They connect you to the nearest one. When the police broke the door down he was in the bathroom. He hid the razor before he came out. He was so mad at me. He hated me. He wanted a divorce. He never wanted to see me again. And to be honest I was pretty angry too, not because of his mental illness but because I felt so helpless. I want to say after a week of the adjusted meds. He called apologizing. He told me how thankful he was that I had called. He was thankful that I didn't budge on him being committed. He was thankful that he had someone who knew him well enough to know that he wasn't manipulating me. He had been pushing me away, which is a sign, or being suicidal, and we had been fighting a lot because of it. You did the right thing, OP. You definitely have done the right thing for her well-being no matter how angry she is now. She'll see it one day. Queen Moogle, dude, what you did is so incredibly fucking hard. But it was the right decision. You tried everything. Doctors, kindness, everything. This is not a normal don't snoop in your partner's stuff circumstance. Your wife is having an actual legitimate health crisis. She cannot act in her own best interest right now, but god damn it you can, and you did. It may take a long ass time for both of you to see it completely, but she needed immediate and intensive psychiatric treatment. Everything matcha. Yup, we are so proud of you, OP, for doing something so hard for your wife. She may resent you now, but when she gets better she'll understand. She cannot comprehend that what you are doing is saving her. We are all rooting for you and your wife's recovery, OP. Hang in there. Update, 8 months later. Hi guys, it's me again. We have a lot of time on our hands, so I thought why not update the community that helped me. Even if it was just to let me know that I could vent. I don't even know how much time has passed, but I am very happy to say that things are working out. I have my wife's permission to share this with you all, and she is even telling me to greet you. After being in the 72-hour stay, it was determined that she had to stay there. My wife was pissed for the first few weeks. It was a devastating time. But time and therapy heals all wounds. Slowly I was allowed to come visit. And every day I went, I saw a bit more of the person I loved. There were setbacks along the way, and I had to watch a lot what I said and did. For example, the first few weeks she wouldn't tolerate touch or something like that. Our trust had to be regained slowly. From both parts. We put so much work in. And even now that she is back home, and has been for a while, we sometimes have bad days where it is difficult for my wife to get out of bed, or where I am suspicious of her getting back into that state. But at the end of the day, I'm happy. We go to counseling together, and we are on individual therapy as well. Especially because due to the stress I developed a form of anxiety. But every day it's a bit better. I have discovered new sides of my wife, like the new hobby that she has of making resin jewelry and decorations. Even our quarantine time has been quite peaceful. We still have remote therapy and everything. Things are not normal yet. And adoption is not back on the table as of now. We have given yourself at least a year of therapy before we think about parenting and raising a child. One thing is for certain. I am still in love with my wife, and I still love her so much. Our relationship might not be better than ever, but it sure as hell is stronger than ever. Also, she has done a lot of self-reflection and of course has thanked me for how I handled things. She is lovely. We are happy. Comments would it? Did you ever get a definitive cause from the doctors? This seems so surreal, I've never heard of it before. OOP, not a definitive cause but the trigger at least. 7 Orange Files. This is wonderful news. I remember your story. It was terrifying. Full marks for supporting her. Sick and tired. Good on you for helping your wife get the help she needs. That was a terrible experience, but you really stepped up. Even if things aren't perfect, you've both come a long way. I'm so happy for you. Minok 33. Good to hear things are looking up and you won't be considering adopting in the near future. Matter of fact, it might be a good time to use some of those therapy sessions to start preparing yourselves for the likely possibility that you won't ever be able to adopt. Agencies have to say that an applicant's mental history isn't an automatic deal killer, but in reality it often is. They simply can't risk adopting out children to people suffering from such extreme mental illness that involuntary stays were required. It's all but a guarantee that they'd never allow children to be placed under your wife's care. Your mental health history is part of the background check, and red flags like involuntary holds will often exclude you from adopting. They'll still have you go through the whole process and pretend like you have a chance, but reality is you probably won't be eligible. They just can't risk putting children in the care of people with a history of mental illnesses.